Hey everyone, Tim here. What's about to follow is not our normal episode. In fact, Josh, Ben, and I joined Tom Corliss on his podcast, WDWNT Live, on Friday, April 3rd. The show is actually a video podcast, and if you look on their YouTube feed or in our show notes, you'll see the video version of the show as well. We hope you enjoy it, and now, here's Tom.
Oh, that was very abrupt. Hey everybody. I assume we're on. Nick's doing things, so who knows. But hey, everybody, and welcome to WDWNT Live. We're live on this Friday evening. Thank you for joining us, April 3rd. And we got some special programming planned for this evening. We have some special guests. Joining me from I'm going to get the correct podcast this time instead of what it said in all of the marketing for tonight. The Marty Called podcast. Tim, Ben, and Josh.
How you doing, Tom?
Hey.
Hey, Tom.
How's it going? I don't know if do we have you guys on camera at all?
In theory, we do.
You got to give
my camera's showing up on here.
Yeah, just give Nick a minute. There we go.
There we go.
We got everybody.
Hey.
So for those at home,
That's me.
Those at home unaware, introduce yourselves. Tell us about your podcast, your personal life, whatever you want to share.
Ben, why don't you kick it off? You're the longest member of the Disney fan community.
Yeah.
Longest or oldest?
Something. Ben Rubstock here. Started many years ago with Inside the Magic with Ricky Brigandi with my old Cruising the World segment, Cruising the World with Skipper Ben, and did that for many years with Ricky, and kind of took some time off and got a call from Tim one day to join up on this podcast with him. So after a few years of retirement in the podcasting world, I'm back and enjoying doing the show with Tim and Josh.
Okay. I agree. Those are all true things. Josh, how about you, since apparently I'm conducting these interviews now?
I mean, I'm just an old dude that is nostalgic for the way the parks used to be, and I've always been fascinated by the park operations and the legal and operational aspects of them, and through just the magic of the internet, I met you guys, I met the Kingdom Cast crew, and that's sort of how I got wrapped up in all this, but I'm just another guy that loves the parks and likes thinking about and talking about what makes them tick and what's good and what's bad and what I would do if I had the magical power to, dictate their future.
That is kind of the gist of our show. Marty Called is more about the Imagineering side of things. I'm Tim Grassi, by the way. I've been around for a while with varying levels of success or lack thereof on WDW Fanboys, E-Ticket Report, and now Marty Called to these guys.
Great. So, what do you guys want to talk about?
Well, Tom, let me tell me why you called. Let's see. You put it out there as a call for any podcasters to join you. So we had a few of our fans reach out to you and kind of push you in the direction to having us on. We've had our fair share of run-ins in the past. Let's call a spade a spade.
I would say that, yeah.
But I think we can.
You two have had.
Yeah, particularly wrong way. Particularly us.
Yeah, there you go.
You two.
So I looked up a few of our various interactions, and a lot of it is kind of, trying to hold you accountable for things. And don't get me wrong, you are not the only person who I have had this spat with and would call out. But I think that with your role as really the largest news source for Disney news, that certain standards need to be met. And I know you went to journalism school and you generally do a good job, but when I see something that is either misreported or maybe has a headline that might be out of whack, I call attention to it. And I think that's generally where my arguments with you have become, and then they probably degenerate from there into name calling and things that aren't as productive. Is that fair?
So can I come out of the barrel hot as the devil's advocate?
Go for it.
If we just assume for the sake of argument that every allegation you're going to make is proven to be absolutely true, it still couldn't be as bad as any mainstream media outlet, could it? I mean, I feel like
that's absolutely fair.
I feel like to some degree the whole world of news reporting and media is such that if all you did was create neutral, objective, well-sourced, rational reports, that no one would tune in because you would be noise that would be blurred out by all of the people who are just, being a little hyperbolic and clickbaity in what they do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, CNN and Fox News are both equally guilty of being BuzzFeed headline-driven sites as well. So, I mean, I'm going to defer to Ben and Tom on this because they're both kind of in that same line of work. But when you're taking journalism classes, what is the official word on articles? Are they intended to draw you into a specific story, or is it supposed to be the most informative thing there? Like, I don't even know how to phrase this question, but you know that I'm dancing around clickbait. So what is the motivation of just writing a proper headline?
I think when I went to school, like, no one even used the word clickbait. I mean, like, certainly I went to school in the internet age, but you got to remember, like, my professors most of them were newspaper guys. And so they taught us extensively, like, headline writing. And so a lot of my headlines, like, sure, I added on, like, the breaking, rumored, and confirmed thing. But otherwise, that's mostly, like, what I was taught by. One guy we had was Wall Street Journal. Another guy was the Post. Another guy was, I don't even know where the third guy was, but the Wall Street Journal, Post, forget what else. But, like, those guys would spend a couple classes on headline writing and stuff
Hustler,
like that.
I think.
And I mean, that's...
Yeah, Hustler.
Oh, I'm not the new owner of Inside the Magic, so probably not, but, you know.
Speaking of clickbait type articles, they are just as guilty of that. Sorry, Ben, but
Well, it's not the Inside the Magic that Ben worked for. So.
No, it's not. It absolutely isn't. It isn't.
You know, but Ricky was great. Ricky, I still think, was the absolute only real competition we ever had. I think he was the only other person that really cared and worked hard and did a really great job more often than not.
Right.
I agree with Tom, though, on there that, you know, back when I was in journalism school and everything, that we weren't writing headlines. We weren't writing stories for the internet. That's how I am old enough to go back that far. And oftentimes, you know, when a writer writes a story, they hand off that story and it's up to a whole other person to come up with those headlines to begin with anyway. But we live in a world where if the headline's not catchy, unfortunately, the search engines don't find it, they don't pop it, and they don't put it in there. There are keywords that you have to put in these articles to make your article stand out more than any other. So, you know, I definitely fall on the side that I don't blame you at all for the way you write your headlines. You have to do those things because that's how those things get found in the world we live in right now. And you're not the only one that does that. Like you referred to with the regular, just mainstream news organizations, they all do the same thing these days.
So I think that. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
what I was going to say is that you know, in the times that people around me have brought up WDWNT and its reporting, I think the thing that's disappointed me the most is that the quality of the articles was always pretty good. And I'm pretty sure if you go back and look at the record of what I've said, it's that if anything, maybe the headline undermines the quality of the reporting because the content is there. You know, and the headline, you know, I maybe it's just an untenable situation. And the truth is, I'm trying to be as honest as I can here. It's real easy to talk bad about someone.
I don't even disagree with you, but I've always said, like, the point of the headline is to get people to read it. And I always would tell, now that I'm not the only one writing stuff for the site, I always tell the writers the headline, of course, has to be, you can't lie to people. Like, you obviously should not lie to people. And I don't think we do. But there is, at the same time, there's only so much you could fit in there, and so you pick out the things from the article that you think are the most interesting, or I always say, what's gonna make you click the story? But then, obviously, in the story, our job is to give you the accurate information. I think that's what we've always tried to do is, some headlines certainly have been along the line of clickbait. I don't disagree with that, but I always think the quality of the article is always there. I just think that's what you had to do. Otherwise, you don't stick out. Otherwise, you fall into, you know, how many of these sites are there that exist that I think just kind of blend in and never really get attention? I think like Attractions and like that whole little group. I just think they always kind of fall through the cracks. They're kind of bland. They're kind of boring. You got to stand out in some way. Otherwise, you're just another one of the same.
I mean, I think I'd be, as someone who's, you know, been on the Kingdom Cast for the last 5 years, I'd be somewhat of a hypocrite if I didn't say that, you know, doing something that stands out doesn't work, because obviously it does. I mean, it doesn't make you very unique or interesting to be interested in theme parks. The entire reason they exist is because an overwhelming majority of people find them to be, not many people go to an amusement park like Disney or a theme park like Disney and say, boy, this sucks, I want to go somewhere else. So, to rise above the noise floor, I guess you do have to be unique in some way. I will say your reasonableness and open-mindedness is making it extraordinarily hard for Tim to launch the attack on you that I think he wanted to.
I think a lot of people have said this over the years. Like, I don't come across well on Twitter. I fully understand that.
You could be president.
Well, we went over words that I couldn't say before the show. I'm going to stick with jerk, because I'm a jerk myself. I generally use a stronger word, but I think we can kind of relate in that.
I think in the last year I've been called far worse than the word you were going to use anyway. So.
It's very easy to be a tough guy on internet, and also to assume that the person that you're disagreeing with would be, going to fisticuffs with you if you had to encounter them. It's another thing to actually have a dialogue. And I think podcasts and publishing on the web both suffer from this problem, and it's a one-way conversation. Yeah. Right. So there's this, people don't like to feel like they're not being heard. And naturally, I mean, the four of us right now, we're talking at the world. There's not really a bidirectional nature to it. So if anybody says anything that somebody doesn't agree with, they assume that there's someone we won't like, or that we are going to be fundamentally, opposed to on all issues. And that's, the world's more complicated than that. So maybe what we're doing today is the right thing, which, just reach out and talk.
Well, I think that the time is right. I think we're all in a pretty bad situation, and maybe everyone should realize that the Twitter arguing and everything is probably the healthiest way to go through life.
And Tom, I just wanted to say, if you're not real familiar with our show, Tim and I don't understand half the stuff that Josh says. He's way smarter than both of us. So just know, if he starts spitting some of this stuff out and we get this glazed look over our eyes, it's common with every episode of our show.
There's a good 400 point difference in Josh's SAT scores than ours. So
yes,
I want to go back to something that Josh mentioned 10 minutes or so ago about media in general, and then the niche that we are all have our own part of. Let's call everybody on this show right now a Disney expert. At least in the commonality of the world, we are all Disney experts. We see misinformation about things like Disney in mainstream media, and we cringe at it because there's misinformation. Harry Potter's referred to as a theme park, things like that. So with that said, if you're at all involved in any niche industry and you're an expert in that field, you're going to see that all the time. What we see here is when you've got something like rumors, you're obviously dealing with a fickle, highly volatile subject. Have you? I don't want to have you expose sources, so that's not going to be productive at all. Have you been? Have you felt you've been burnt? Have you felt you've been burnt by sources in the past? And I am leading somewhere with this, but I'll just put a general question out there. I'm not trying to bait you or anything like that.
No, because you develop people over time. I feel like what I used to do was, obviously, especially now, we get contacted by a ton of people, and then people just. And my favorite is Instagram, because there are some. If you thought Twitter was crazy, man. I mean, the Instagram people are nice, but the rumors they try to throw at us on there are insane. Things that, a crazy person in an institution would just come out with after reading a guide map.
That a Disney bus driver would say.
No, crazier. I mean, they're going to build a Black Cauldron land. Just the craziest.
Breaking confirmed.
Biggest nonsense. But no, I think what I used to do was I generally would sit on things, and I think eventually people's stuff would pan out enough where I'd be like, well, this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. So there were very rarely times where there was one-time people. They were usually these, usual suspect people who after a while it became clear, oh, I know where you work. Now it's pretty obvious. Obviously, I don't like to be wrong. It's not fun to be wrong. But at the same time, I certainly with Country Bears, I'm glad they didn't go forward with it. That makes me very happy. Whether or not
It did lead up to a very funny thing with you and Derek.
Whether or not I was happy to live through that period of time, we knew it was one of the possible outcomes when we came out with that. And we sat on that for weeks, if not months. I mean, before we.
You should be happy to have lived through it.
What was that?
You would have missed the apocalypse. Thank God you lived through it, and you would be missing all of this exciting nonsense that's happening in the world today.
Oh boy, I'm sure glad no one took me out.
You mentioned the Country Bears, and I think, I don't know if everybody has heard this. I don't know if your listeners have heard this. Your interaction with my former co-host, Derek Bergen, following that, which I thought is a pretty funny story. The first time you met him, and it surrounds that Country Bear Jamboree story that you had.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
At Coronado?
I don't know where the location was.
I just know we were of course, that touring plans money and the WDWNT money, we were concierge level at Coronado, the new tower, Grand Destino, and so he sat with us at the club level lounge. I don't remember the interaction that much. I don't know if it was that profound. What exactly are you going to reference?
My recollection, at least what he told me, is he said that he said something to the effect of, "Screw you, Tom. You ruined my dream of having a Toy Story marionette show." I thought it was funny, and I very rarely give Derek credit. So
Derek is probably the funniest person in the entire community. I'm fine.
See you later.
I respectfully disagree, and we're done. You just gave him like 5 years of insufferable ammo at this point. Thanks for that. We really appreciate it.
I mean, I can think of several Derek Bergen things that are legendary. I think about the Rivers of Light coming out of the water to put, like, what was it? It said 0 days since our last malfunction or whatever. And the Lotus is bringing the 1. Or the Lotus is bringing the 0. There's a 1 on the board, and the Lotus is bringing the 0. These are
even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Derek has found his voice. It is on Twitter. We don't want to hear him speak again. You mentioned Country Bear Jamboree in the Tiki Room, and I have been amongst those that kind of laugh off the WDWNT Save the Country Bear Jamboree in the Tiki Room. However, we did have a lengthy conversation about it on the e-ticket report, and I kind of threw out the various scenarios that are probably likely here. Or not likely, but the various scenarios as they played out. So one of them, Corliss made it up. I don't believe that's true. Somebody fed you information to snuff out a leak. Possible. It was a real project fed to you to gauge interest. Possible. Real project that someone leaked to you in hopes it would create outrage. I'd say that's possible as well. Real project that was going to be announced at the D23 Expo and they got cold feet because of the reaction. I think it's probably one of those, if you agree or disagree. It sounds like you're probably leaning towards the last thing, though, that was supposed to be announced at the Expo.
I think they were looking for stuff to do for the 50th, and I think those two projects have to coexist because it's a shared building. So if you're going to be blowing out walls and stuff in one, that's why the other one made sense, I think. Given the current management and given what was going, and I don't think Disney's response would have been what it was if we weren't right. I think, and there are things I can't even talk about on the air that have happened since then that do nothing but point at the fact that it absolutely was a real thing and they want it swept under the rug and no one wants to ever talk about it again. But then again, who knows?
So
they might even just pull it out in 2 years and be like, yep, now it's time. Now we're going to do it. Because I don't think they care. I just think at that moment in time, I think I was a big enough problem where it was decided, like, we're going to put the brakes on this thing anyway. I believe someone in the PR department convinced them that, hey, if we go on the Parks blog and like D23 posted, if we go on all these places and say that this rumor is crap, then that's the end of him. He'll just go away. Like, that'll be it. And I think, and I might, if I was sitting in that room, I might think the same thing. I might think, like, if we, the Walt Disney Company, come out and say, hey, this blogger's just making stuff up, you're the Walt Disney Company. I would think most people would believe you.
That's fair. Now, we've said one of the things I see, and Jim Hill gets thrown under the bus for a lot of stuff like this as well, are things that were legitimate rumors, things that were legitimate projects. The most notable one that I think he gets yelled at for is the Monsters, Inc. roller coaster, which was a legitimate project. But if you go to press too early with it, you get you get slammed. This is where I'm going to give you some credit now. on whenever it was, you had the Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway news out first. And you had basically everything spot on. And what was interesting is literally that morning I was getting emails from other people with exact same information. And what you posted coincided with theirs that wasn't public. And it was just a spot on article. And if I'm not mistaken, you also had a scene by scene before anybody else. Is that correct?
Scene by scene, we told you what the ride cars were going to be, like all that. There wasn't anything left for Runaway Railway, I think.
Right. So with Runaway Railway then, because that's something that effectively you got 100% correct throughout the process, is that a source that you go to or multiple sources that you go back to more often? Like I'm trying to gauge an idea of like, was that something that you had sourced by 2 or 3 people? The level of confidence in a story like that.
Sometimes things would come from multiple people. Like Guardians of the Galaxy was out there, but then Mission Breakout, and then not only did someone say it's real, which we ran with, but then that person also then told me hey, here's the date and time they're announcing it at Comic-Con. And we even ran that week. We said, hey, they're going to announce it at Comic-Con this week. But yeah, sometimes you have more than one person, but sometimes I think there are people that have come through more times than not, and I don't think sometimes they also send you stuff that's just irrefutable. I don't believe people have the time to make blueprints and stuff like
that's
that.
That's fair. No, that's fair.
And I always refrain from posting that stuff because my thought with that was that's the stuff that's it's going to be easy for people to identify a source, and I obviously didn't want anyone getting in trouble because it was a far more innocent thing than I think Disney wanted to admit. I think Disney eventually made it a very serious thing. But I think Theme Park Rumors always felt like a way more innocent thing, especially in the Jim Hill days and WW Magic and all of those. I think it just felt like, oh, we're just a bunch of fans and we're talking about what's coming up next. And it didn't feel like it was a thing anyone actually would get upset about or anything. And I think over the years, I think particularly Bob Chapek really likes to announce things. I think he likes to stand on stage and announce things. And I think
I always arrangement.
I always thought the timing of the Country Bear and the Tiki Room rumors and everything that happened before this D23 was. I thought the timing was interesting because the previous D23, I still remember the videos of you in the hall laughing during the announcements because there was a lot of correct rumors.
You did pretty well.
You did announce up there, yeah. So I find something a little fishy with what they did on their end leading into this D23 to disrupt what happened the previous time around.
Yeah, and it wasn't like I know when they're giving me plants because let's be honest, they're not really good at it. I think once or twice they definitely gave me things I felt were like plants, and it's like, oh, he's gonna run with this, and I was like, oh yeah, it's like 2 other people. They're like, no, I was just like, yeah, okay, probably gonna stay away from that one.
So
you
that previous conversation is a good. This is a good segue for something I wanted to bring up. You may or may not know, but I'm the attorney that got Adam the Woo back in the parks, and I've represented a couple other people that have been trespassed. And being in that world, your name has come up by virtue of the fact that you have broken some of these things that pretty clearly came from leaks inside the company. And I've got a couple of acquaintances that report on companies like Apple, for example. And it's interesting because those guys all have sources inside the company that give them information, whether it's someone in the supply chain or someone works for corporate. But there's an important difference there, which is that Apple's not an amusement park. There's not a whole lot that Apple can do to someone who reports on leaks that they get. Whereas as a theme park operator, a place that you can go, ostensibly the Disney company has a lot more leverage over you because they can essentially threaten to not allow you into the parks if you continue to do this, which is, as someone who likes liberty and freedom, it's sort of a quandary for me that's hard for me to really decide where I fall on it. But I just wonder, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine. Do you feel pressure from that? Has the company tried to leverage the weight that it has to keep you out of the parks in order to curtail your reporting, or have they been pretty open to letting you run with the sources that you have?
I think we've had very open conversation. More so in the since Country Bears, we've had far more open conversation. Which is and because I'll be honest, like I've told this story on the air after the 2017 Expo, is when I finally sat down with the PR department after the whole Tron thing, and they were like, and it was at the time a very positive conversation. It was a lot of, we're not going to tell you what you can and can't post. We just really would like a heads up that it's coming, so I don't get a bunch of angry phone calls.
Really?
Yeah, that
seems like a pretty respectable
in 2017. Now, if there's a conversation in 2019, it's likely very different. But yeah, obviously, like I don't want that. That's never been the goal of this. Like as I've said a million times, I think theme park rumors felt. I think for the longest time felt like pretty harmless things. And you're right. Like I think my example always was like the new iPhone would leak every time. Like I don't recall a time the new iPhone didn't leak to the public.
No, it's about 100%.
Yeah, and I always thought like, okay, well that's a reputable site. Like, and in many cases, I believe the sites that, maybe not all of them, but I believe some of the sites that have leaked the iPhone still have some sort of press credentials or press access to Apple. Like, I think that still happens.
Well, I think there, to some degree, there's a too big to fail component there.
Yeah.
If you're, Bob Smith and you have a supply chain contact and you release what the iPhone 12 or whatever the heck they're going to name the next one because their naming convention is impenetrable at this point. That's one thing. But if you're a BuzzFeed, if you're someone who has, a tremendously large audience, I mean, honestly, there's a strategic component there as to deciding, is this really, does it make sense to actually use the strength that we have in order to silence this voice, because it can actually do more harm than good. And it's fascinating to me. I think we're all trying to figure out what it is that media is supposed to do in the world where everybody has 1,000 devices and access to all the world's information. And, I don't think there's any real simple answers at this point.
And I don't know that Disney's ever figured out their relationship with the community. I don't think they've ever quite figured it out. Like there's been these interesting moments. I think the moment when they started letting websites into media events was an interesting moment. And I think since then there's been this, like, they're really big, but, and I remember like Ricky back in the day, I feel like a number of things broke on Inside the Magic for over some years. I feel like there were plenty of things there early. And I think there was this I don't know what conversations they had.
It was mostly positive.
I think over time it became like, well, do you like coming to these? And it's like, yeah, we like coming to these. And it's like, well, we didn't really care for this one thing. And it's like, well, okay. And I never had those conversations with them. I was on the media list. We posted about Disney Springs. We were never spoken to. No one spoke to us about it. It was a completely silent thing. Just stopped getting invites. And at that point, I was like, well, okay. And then we just kept posting theme park rumors because it's fun and people like it, and we're a Walt Disney World news site. It's part of the game, right?
And I can say from my time back in the day, I was gonna say with the Inside the Magic, I was never told what I could or couldn't say on that show. I know Ricky had a relationship with them, but nothing ever came my way saying, hey, when you talk about something one or another, we were a very positive podcast. There's no getting around that. We both just love Disney. We were very early in this stuff. This was us just looking to entertain people, and really we wanted to reach out to those people who, it's like me now consuming your content, Tom. I'm in Texas. I'm so far away from the parks every day. I just want that little break where I can feel like I'm there. And, you provide it, and there's others, on the web and social media that do the same thing. But that's what Ricky and I were doing back in the day, was just kind of bringing the parks to those people who weren't as close as he was, basically living behind the Magic Kingdom. Now, if he had conversations with what he could and couldn't do once he started getting on the media list and covering more things for him, that's something for him to talk about. But nothing was ever fed back to me. Yeah. As being a part of that show, saying, hey, toe the line for this and that. So
I don't even think it was ever more of like opinion things or stuff. I think rumors just started like vanishing at some point. I don't know if you guys feel the same. I feel like at some point in time between like 2010 and I don't know, like 2015, like the rumors just kind of went away, and I feel like everybody used to post them, and then I feel like everybody else eventually stopped. What did you say?
There were no projects. That's why I forgot to build something for 5 years.
That's fair.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, Tom, and I'm 95% sure that in the 2011 D23 Expo Parks and Resorts presentation, we sat next to each other. We didn't hold hands, but we sat next to each other. And I think you, me, and everybody else that was kind of in that section walked out puzzled. Like they forgot to announce projects.
That was the Fantasy Fair year?
Yeah.
I think that was the highlight. It was that, and like we're going to bring back the Tahitian Terrace, which I don't know that they really did in the capacity that they said they were going to.
The like VR thing they were talking about, not even VR, it was like we're going to bring back Circle Vision and the Tahitian Terrace, and it was a very vague, weird announcement that never amounted to anything.
So, Tom, can I tell you why Tim really remembers that?
Oh, God. Do I want
I'm not sure where he's going with this, but okay.
Tim came back from this. Now, this is just, I was not there, so I have no idea what really happened, but I know what Tim told me happened. He said, so I went to D23. I was standing next to Tom Corliss. I introduced myself and said, hey, it's Tim from whatever podcast he was on. And Tom looked at me and said, yeah, like I know who you are. And I feel like Tim's feelings were hurt so bad by that. That is what you told me. Don't rewrite history, buddy.
I believe the exchange. No, I believe the exchange was as follows: Tim from WDW Fanboys, and I believe it was I've heard of you, and that was about it. And that was the extent of the exchange.
I feel like that might be a little from the version I got.
It might have been. I honestly don't remember. But I'm going to say that you were rude because it helps frame the narrative a little bit better.
I was probably I've told people before, like in my family, I'm considered the quiet one, which no one ever believes. Yeah. But I was a very shy kid, and so you got to remember, like when I started the website, I was still only 18. I had not had a ton of social interaction outside of like kids in school at that point. So in the early years of the website, I'm not the most personable individual.
I mean, I didn't know who you were then, so it was just a matter of like me introducing myself to the only other person in the row, because the way that they were press at these things.
Tim's personality is terrible.
Oh yeah, no, I'm an a-hole too. But
it's likely I just shook your hand and said hello because I didn't know what else to say. That does seem like me.
You shook his hand. You're the ones that you two started all this.
But to your point about no projects, or really just the silence of rumors, you also have to look at who was putting it out there. Like back in the early 2000s, it was Screamscape, and I don't know that they've had a scoop on Disney in 25 years. It was Jim Hill, who's predominantly the main person, and then it was a couple people over on WDW Magic. And my site tracks this stuff, basically sources it back to you, to whoever says it, and people eat this stuff up. I mean, my news articles, granted they're mostly like summaries, too long, didn't read articles, but they get 5% of my traffic, and the rumor posts that are summaries of what's going on with rumors and aggregating it all, that's 95% of my traffic.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably see similar things when you have a new rumor. That's what drives people to your site.
You would be amazed at the dumb things people read.
Okay,
and this is what I told Disney when I had a call with them. And they're like, and I think like they would try to point at, in later years, they try to point at like, oh, that rumor stuff makes you all this money and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, do you want to know what the highest posts of the year? One year, the highest post of the year was when we announced the soda flavor changes at Club Cool.
That makes sense.
Whatever year that was the number one post of the year. Ticket price increases. That kind of stuff. The only one of those things, and actually it's not even one of those, the Skyliner accident is going to be, was the biggest story of last year, but I mean, it had to be, right?
Yeah.
But like those rumor posts probably end up in the top 30, but they're never in the top 10. The top 10 is always like price increases, trip planning stuff. So if they change fast pass tiers, if they change, I'm trying to think what other stuff along those lines, like extra magic hours, things that people love that trip planning stuff. That's the bread and butter of the industry. The rumor stuff, we love that stuff. Like the four of us like that stuff. And there's a group of people who certainly do, but a majority of them have not done nearly as well as what I would consider garbage. Like it's news, it's not stuff I wouldn't post, but it's usually like fast pass tier changes and things like that are the things that do the best. And then there's the hardcore fans like us who will read. There's the occasional one, like there's one or two anomalies. The Star Wars Hotel was an anomaly, but that we had that survey had the art, it had pricing. I mean, it wasn't just like a vague, like they're going to open a Star Wars Hotel. If you found that on social media, there was concept art of the lobby already, and I mean, it wasn't even announced yet. So like there's exceptions to that, and I think Star Wars is one of the few, but generally those aren't.
I just want to clarify one thing. The Skyliner issue was not an accident. That was an unscheduled commingling of ride vehicles. Yeah. That's straight from Disney PR.
Yeah. That email got me in a lot of trouble.
I love how they say that's not an accident.
They didn't like my response. But anyway.
You said you've had interactions with Disney PR. Have any of those interactions resulted in like inadvertent validation of a story? Like meaning that you were going to put something out there, but PR has asked you.
They don't contact me if the story is right.
Okay. Have you been censored by putting something out that they didn't want you to put out?
I've always, and honest, this is an honest thing. Anytime they made a request outside of the Skyliner accident, anytime they made a request, we always did whatever they asked. Because I never felt they were unreasonable requests. So like when we announced that Hong Kong was redoing their castle, WDI called and said they weren't completely happy with the way I phrased that they were building a new castle. They wanted it to be a reimagined castle, and honestly, like I didn't feel like it was worth burning a bridge there over phrasing because it didn't change the story. The story was still that they were building a castle on top of the existing castle, So
that gives you an idea of like how much scrutiny the Disney Parks blog posts go through, where every word has to be so carefully chosen and is so anal retentive. And you said, half an hour ago about their relationship with the fan community and with the press itself. They don't have a relationship. They have a relationship with people that are favorable to them, and that's it.
Well, because the same thing is like
technically contacting you because you're big enough, but
the current PR department is mostly full of people who have been at that job since before they were letting the fan sites into events. That department hasn't changed a lot in my time. Like the Disneyland side has. The PR people on the Disneyland side have changed a lot, but I just feel like that's an LA thing. Like there's a lot of PR job opportunities, and a lot of them are just trying to work their way up to the studio or a studio. But on the Florida side, those people have been there my entire time and beyond that. Like there's people I know who tell me like in the early 2000s, those are the same people they dealt with, like Charles Stovall and all those guys. They've just been there since the beginning of at least the internet age of all of this. And so I think that's why nothing ever changes. It's always, I don't know, the situation doesn't change because the people somehow, even through the advent of blogs and social media, somehow the same people have remained there, and it's amazing.
You said a while ago that you don't come off great on Twitter. I've found, and while I don't always adhere to it, a little humility goes a long way, and I think that might be part of the problem. And I'm going to call it out: owning mistakes as opposed to trying to say, all right, I got fed a bad source or whatever it may be. And I'm not going to list off various mistakes you've put out there. I'm sure that it's going on in the chat right now. But those are the types of things that really frustrate me when, I run a business as well. If I make a mistake, I own it. I apologize to the client. I do whatever I can to make it right. In this case, I don't know definitively whether or not you've ever posted a retraction to a story that was incorrect, or if it's been like a Twitter or Facebook correction or anything like that. But
we've corrected things.
If you have examples of
stuff
like that
got published that wasn't correct. Someone jumped to a conclusion about windows falling off a monorail, and I had to quickly clean that situation up. But certainly the story was updated with the correct information.
Okay. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you want credit for what you get right, and you get quite a bit right, the criticism is going to come. Your site is too big.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what you do for a living,
It's
but the criticism is going to come when you get something wrong.
To say, and people like to be mean. It's not exclusive to this fan community. It's not exclusive to any.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, it's just the internet.
So to that point, how is your war with Disney going?
I would say it's over. I think things are much better now.
Okay. Was it like,
do you get more anxiety when you consider the possibility of not reporting on something that ends up being big versus maybe reporting prematurely and finding it being wrong? Which one gives you the most stress? Because I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I imagine both of them would be pretty terrible.
A lot of that stuff, it is very rare that things were published within 24 hours of me getting information. There was a lot of checking with people. Like I would ask a lot of questions. Like I'll make sure, like even if whatever they say, like the Toy Story marionette show, there was a lot of questions. I was like, is it a puppet show? Are they animatronics? Like what are they reusing the bears? Like what are they doing? Why is this being done?
Who's getting fired for this?
Yeah. Like you're sure this budget is already allotted? Yeah, that's a thing. Okay.
You may have seen some of these documents. I've got a couple of, I think it was pre-2017 5-year plans for Epcot. You've probably seen similar documents where it has, the budget that's in the billions and the various projects that have since been hatcheted down or removed entirely. Those types of things circulate. They exist. They absolutely exist. Yeah. And I'm not necessarily inclined to criticize you for putting a rumor out like that, because those things get as close to greenlit. Some even get greenlit and announced. I remember back in the day, I asked Jim Hill on a podcast who had a better track record, him or Jay Rizzullo. And it really came down to like stuff being announced at that point in time in that 2010 to 2015 range. They kept on announcing project that got canceled. Yeah. And it seems like they're doing that right now as well. And I mean, there are extenuating circumstances now. One of the bullet points that I had in my notes was that we all need to find some common ground. So I'm thinking you can agree on some of these things. Epcot forever, good or bad?
Garbage.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's
Frozen
garbage, I think, technically. Terrible.
Frozen Ever After, where does it belong?
Where does it belong?
Yes.
I don't have a problem.
There's only one correct
with
answer.
It. I really don't.
Right,
I love Maelstrom, but it was weird. Guests came off of that and were like confused. Some of them, if you waited like 60 minutes, you were really upset. Listen, I miss Maelstrom.
This isn't an endorsement of Maelstrom. It's just a.
But like Future World is the thing I'm fighting for. Like World Showcase, whatever.
God,
I think it's a.
You're making it very hard to argue with you, unfortunately, which is what I do for a living.
I'm not going to praise Maelstrom. I'm not going to say that Maelstrom was a sacred attraction that needed to be protected. The two can be mutually exclusive. It's like Josh and I will have conversations about politics. Just because I don't like President Trump doesn't mean I like Hillary Clinton. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. So, all right, Fast Pass Plus. Where do we stand on that?
I don't dislike. As a local, it works for me though. So I've lived here throughout the whole time of Fast Pass Plus. So in the old days, I would have had to show up in the morning to get Soarin' or Toy Story Mania or whatever. I, as a local, really love opening the app and just checking the 4 parks, and usually that'll dictate where I go. Like maybe like a Slinky Dog will randomly pop up, or Tower, or just something I'd like to do that day. And that's, as a local, it's probably better, but I haven't gone through.
How about versus Max Pass
as a tourist in this age?
How about Fast Pass Plus versus Max Pass? That's a better way to frame the question.
I like Max Pass better as a tourist in California.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Okay.
Yeah.
Does Target belong in a Parks and Resorts presentation?
No. Does experiences belong in the Parks and Resorts division?
No, it doesn't. I assume you're just in general not a Chapek Iger fan. from
I
what they've
liked
done to the
Iger
parks.
early on. I think he was doing great in the beginning, and then I think at some point he just got consumed with the streaming service and maximizing that Star Wars purchase, and I think the wheels came off. But
isn't-
it's
I mean, he's never been a
undoubtable
Parks
that
guy.
I think like what they did from like 2010 to like 2017 even, I think was great. I think they fixed a lot of problems. I mean, Mystic Manor I think is the best thing they've ever done anywhere, and that opened during the Stags administration. The thing they built next to it, the Grizzly Mountain Runaway Mine Cars, is a really great throwback ride too. Pandora's great. What else in that? Cars Land, and like they fixed a lot. World of Color. They fixed a lot of problems in a lot of parks, and I think they were on the right track. And then at some point, the wheels just kind of came off.
I would say that,
Are you-
aside from, although the shareholders might not agree with this, when you look at Eisner and Iger collectively, as a theme parks fan, it seems to me that there's a strong incentive maybe to consider limiting the tenure of CEOs for the company, because it seems as though,
Yeah.
it's a delicate line that these people have to walk, because obviously balancing the business interests and the shareholder interests and, a lot of different divisions. In the college course I teach, I won't even let my students write about Disney because they're involved in so much stuff that it's hard to really keep it all straight. But it seems to me that the theme parks tend to be the biggest victim of long-lived CEOs in this company. And I'm concerned that now we have a new CEO who's seems like his first 10 or 15 years might be problematic for the parks. But, I don't really have a question or a point here other than to say that I'm concerned. You couple all of that with what's happening with COVID-19. It's pretty easy to have a negative outlook on what the parks are going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years.
It's going to get slow again. I mean, I think everyone keeps asking, and I think every day I say, I think if they haven't started construction on it, it's probably dead.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable to say. I would be surprised if whatever the Mary Poppins attraction
That's gotta
is
be gone.
happens.
God.
Yeah,
I
that
wouldn't
seemed
be
pretty low.
surprised
That
if
was
it's-
low fruit anyway.
It wasn't a gate buster to begin with. It was just kind of a IP infusion.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the
Will they
reimagining
finish
of
the Star Wars
Epcot?
Hotel?
Oh, everyone at one.
Sorry.
It's like
1,
our
2, 3,
show.
all talk. Ready, go. Josh.
I was,
Go, Josh.
with respect to the reimagining of Epcot, what do you think that the impact there is going to be? Because that's largely not attraction. Obviously, the Gardens of the Galaxy coaster is going to get finished. They're way deep into that. But in terms of the overall aesthetic, there's that one building that I don't even know how to describe it. It's sort of a tall tripod sky needle kind of looking building that was going to be in Future World.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll get finished, or are we going to end up with what Epcot has been for the last 10 years, which is a haphazard
The thing that probably
mess?
saves that stupid building is it's directly connected to money. It's a festival pavilion, so there's a lot of monetary opportunities, and then of course they want to rent that rooftop for dessert parties too. So if anything, that project can probably get saved just because it's directly tied to money. Like there's just a lot of parts of that park that make a lot of revenue that could push that thing along. But Guardians and Ratatouille are going to pull, whether Ratatouille is good or not, which it isn't, it's going to pull people, and people love that movie. So Joe
It's a D
Idaho's
ticket.
going
I
to
think
show
people
up
are
and,
expecting an A.
love his Ratatouille ride.
I don't know. To me, it's an addition. This is the way that Disney can actually avoid a lot of the criticism that all of us, everyone in this
Don't close
call,
something?
certainly. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to give an addition, if you're going to add
place.
something without taking it away, obviously the standard of satisfying people is going to be lower than if you take away something that they have sacred childhood memories bonded to. So if Ratatouille sucks up some people and clears up the pathways in, World Showcase, win, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think obviously people are going to change the way they vacation coming out of what we're going through right now. What do we think about the status of the Star Wars Hotel moving forward? And that hideout, is this an out? You think they'll finish it up, or
It's too late to alter course.
I suspect the people that
completely
can
there.
afford to do it.
It could be
people
Art
that
of
can afford to
Animation
stay there.
situation.
No,
where
there's too
it's
much-
abandoned.
Because you only have, I forget the exact number. We have it somewhere inside 100 room, whatever the number is.
It's limited
It's a
somewhere around
low,
there.
It's low.
It's a low number. So that's not going to be hard to fill. there'll still be enough 1%ers with money no matter what apocalypse strikes to fill that thing. So
That's true.
Do you think the Iger to Chapek CEO switch was in anticipation of coronavirus closing the parks?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we were all trying to figure it out at this point. And
Oh, yeah.
when did it happen? February? We were all like, all right, somebody's sick, somebody's making some sort of political run.
That was a hard decision to
This was
explain the day it happened. It was very easy about 5 days later.
Yes.
I think there's
It wasn't that
something
nonsensical
like
if you look at the
14
fact that they already closed 2 resorts, and Shanghai makes money. And so the fact that, like, they already, like, the numbers he gave out on that first call, which were already, what was it, $100 and something million already. Like, no matter what, he wants, his whole thing is, I want to go out with a bang in this company. And so he had his Disney Plus moment. It's like, well, what's going to be the moment to bail? And then you already have 2 resorts in the world closed. I mean, you're losing, your next couple of quarters aren't going to look amazing anyway, because you're losing money no matter what. So maybe it's just time to get out. So whether he knew, like, there was a possibility there's going to be more, whether or not he had that information, that the writing was on the wall that it was time to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he also left after a great box office year as well. The timing was good. The abruptness of it was what jarred people. And I fear it's more of the same for the parks. I fear all of the intellectual property integration because Chapek is very much on that bandwagon. I mean, you already gave your thumbs down. I think we're all in agreement there that we are not exactly optimistic about the Bob Chapek administration. But at the same time, it might be something where they're not spending any money, so they can't screw up the parks any further than they potentially have.
That's really the thing. And, like, people ask me, what do you prefer, Eisner or Iger? And I said, like, we had some bad years, but at the same time, like, a lot of good stuff just survived through it. Like, we kept the great movie ride. We kept most of Epcot for the most part. Like, the things that at least had survived through the 90s kind of stuck around. Yeah, so I felt like at least through those years, like, they're less dangerous when they're not doing well. I prefer this company when it's failing.
The problem is they neglect things to the point where when they're ultimately replaced, we don't care as much. Yeah. And was kind of the first, decade under Iger as well. Yeah. I want to go back to the Country Bear Jamboree and Tiki Room discussions, because I'm giving credit where it's due. You rallied people in some way, shape, or form, whether that was the intent by posting the article or whether you actually called for it. But you united a community in some way, shape, or form to go up against Disney, to bombard the various powers that be with disapproval. This is something that should not be taken lightly. It's something that is a very valuable tool to have in the future, where we just badmouth the leadership in the parks and resorts and just in the leadership of the company. It's something that I hope, if it comes to it again, that you can use and can kind of arm the community with disapproval. Because those are the things that potentially can put a stop to putting things where they don't belong if it gets out there.
There were some more minor things that I feel like I'm blanking on what they were. Not like attraction things, but just like ancillary charges and stuff. I feel like the last 2 years where everybody kind of got up in arms, and then Disney, like 2 days later, reneged on them. And I'm blanking on what the situations were. They were things not as profound as getting rid of the Country Bears, but they were getting these moments of, if you shame them, if enough people on the internet are like, no, then they feel bad, and then someone up high is like, okay. Which is kind of like the annual pass thing, where it's like Universal already said they're going to stop charging people, but Disney took like a week to mobilize to be like, all right, we got to figure out these annual pass solutions. It's this thing of, if you shame them enough publicly, I think eventually someone in the company's like, hey, we're Disney. Like, they love money. But at the same time, there's like this conscience that's always like, oh, these people are complaining. Maybe it is pretty un-Disney-like what we're doing at the moment, if that makes sense. And I think every once in a while they hear like that conscience.
Those are not mutually exclusive concepts, though, because no matter how loyal your fan base is, if you alienate them for long enough and are tone deaf to what they're telling you they want, eventually that money will stop flowing. And I think there's an old expression in business that success hides a multitude of sins. And I think it's really true. And it relates back to what you just said. When the company's doing great, honestly, there's so many divisions in that corporation. They can get away with a lot of mistakes, and they're not really evident because they're not hurting. And it's like if you translate that to like the individual level, if you're making $300,000 or $400,000 a year, you could be pretty stupid with your money, and you're not going to miss a meal. But when things get really thin, and all of a sudden you're hungry, all of a sudden every little mistake becomes extraordinarily evident. So, when you're dealing with a multinational corporation like Disney, obviously they have so much revenue that all the decisions they make they're just very trailing indicators. It takes a long time for the actual consequence of what they decide to come back. So it makes me kind of happy to see that they're at least marginally tuned in to social media and to the pundits and to the fans, because we do have a voice, and we are being irresponsible if we don't express the things that we don't like.
I was literally walking through Frontierland when you dropped that story, and I've taken a lot of crap on this show with Josh and Tim that the Country Bear Jamboree is my all-time favorite Disney attraction. I adore the thing. So I remember after reading your story, I stood in front of Bear Hall, took a picture, and said something like "over my dead body," posted it up there as well. I don't care what saved it or how it got saved. I'm just appreciative that it got saved one way or another. So thank you to you and everybody. Country Bears for life.
I still can't believe that's your favorite attraction.
Love it.
But like I said before, like I don't take personal credit for saving the Country Bears. Like I could put that out into the universe, but a lot of people had to take action, and people did. Like we've never had a post with that many comments. I can't believe how many people took to letter writing. Like people were sending them. They were getting a lot of mail. And
like on paper,
people, no matter even if what I say or not, people still have to take the action. And no matter how passionate you feel about something, a lot of people get lazy and just won't do anything. They'll be like, "Oh, that's a shame. I like the Country Bears," but then they just go and they watch Tiger King on Netflix. But people
is
mobilize.
There a comparable thing for? Sorry, Siri just heard me. Is there a comparable thing in the community other than maybe like the Save Mr. Toad movement that happened? Is that like the most comparable thing to that
worked out well.
Happened where
because the other ones I think we reacted too late. I think Movie Ride was a mistake. I truly believe
I think they know that was a mistake.
Ride was a mistake. Did it need to be updated? Absolutely. But getting rid of Movie Ride's always going to be one of those. It's going to be another Horizons, another Journey to Imagination. It's going to be one of those.
It was a mistake simply from a capacity play, and they were making capacity mistakes they have been for the last 5 years. And the laughable things about that were they greenlight a third theater for Soarin' and a third track for Toy Story, and then they pushed the highest grossing naturally born IP under Iger into a ride that can get through 1,100 people an hour. Like they made a lot of stupid capacity choices. So when the park was ultimately inundated once Rise opened up, that I think is a bigger issue. Like not having something that can absorb 2,000 people.
Yeah, for all the talk of expanding this park and fixing Hollywood studios, I think it's just as big of a mess as it was before. Like, are there things that, people are more interested in? Probably. But the park is not functional. It wasn't redesigned to function. It was like, we just want to, here are the things we want to put in it. There was no examination of what does the park need if we're going to put Galaxy's Edge in it. It was very much like, oh, we really want to do Toy Story and we really want to do Star Wars, and then in the middle we want to get rid of Movie Ride and put Mickey in there. But none of that in total adds more to do in a day in that park. In fact, it's less. Like there are more rides. There are certainly more rides in that park, but everything you replaced was higher capacity and longer. I mean, you replaced 30 to 45-minute shows. You replaced the Movie Ride, which was 20-something minutes and had great hourly capacity. You got rid of a lot of things that were the only reason that park functioned to begin with, as little as it kind of did, because it never understood what it was.
That park right now has less ride capacity without a height requirement than it did on opening day.
Yeah.
Which is laughable. Because
Yeah.
Because it's, 30 years old now? 31 years old? So that's laughable. Moment of silence for the capacity at
For Disney
MGM.
Studios, yep. In general.
So do you have any questions for us? We've been kind of hogging the let's pick Tom's brain thing. Do you have any questions of us?
I have questions for you guys. I think you voiced.
Okay.
I think my questions were going to be like, Tim, what's your problem with me? But I think you voiced that in the time we've been talking.
How do you sleep at night? Where do you get off? So we were joking before, like we were talking in our own private discussion. You're from the Bronx, Yankee fan, Mets fan, indifferent towards baseball.
I'm in the Bronx.
Okay.
You can't be a Met fan in the Bronx.
You said you were the quiet one, so it's possible that like you just had to move off to the Mets because whatever it may be. But anyway, are you familiar with when Derek Jeter hosted SNL, that episode?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so on that episode, Seth Meyers did a bit. This is before he was hosting Weekend Update with Derek Jeter, and they did point counterpoint.
Yeah.
And the point counterpoint was Derek Jeter sucks.
Yeah.
No, I don't. We could do something like that if you'd like. We could do Tom Corliss sucks. No, I don't. But I haven't really prepared for those types of point counterpoints. And I think that's probably what some of the listeners
Seth
were
Meyers
anticipating.
said in the bit, wouldn't he just like say, "But you suck"? Like, wouldn't that be like his whole?
Pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah. It was like, you suck so hard,
suck.
so bad, and wicked bad. And then he heckled
You
them.
got 30 more seconds, Tim.
So we could do something like that would be productive. But
I just want to know if Tim's unblocked after our conversation now, or on Twitter. How's this going to move forward with you
I can
two?
unblock Tim, but he's just going to do something again. I mean,
it would be inadvertent. I did pull up some of the best of reasons why I got blocked. I'm trying to.
I have an actual question, if that's okay. So obviously
That's
we're
frowned upon.
extraordinarily we're in uncertain and unprecedented times, and I was just wondering, as someone who's built a successful business enterprise on reporting on the parks, what is the plan for this downtime? That's an honest check. I'll give you that.
I think the one thing we've always been able to do is we pivot really well. I think this group of people, I think we always have the ability. I think I'm able to throw out crazy ideas with absolutely, I'm not putting myself over. I think I usually have no idea how to execute them, but I'll usually throw something crazy out, and then I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who can actually make those things happen. So like the second this was announced, it was immediately like my head spinning, like what are we going to do? And the thought was, well, if there's no, I thought news was going to be slower than it is, honestly, but at least now it's not, and it's actually given us a chance to post a lot of really fun stuff and stuff I kind of always wanted to get to. There were videos, like I went to Shanghai a year ago. I never edited the videos because I've never had time. So I finally had like a Saturday where I sat down and was like, I'm going to edit these videos. But like the idea was, if no parks are open, what are we doing as fans? Like what are we going to do? And so the idea was, why don't we just go on live every day? And so I didn't ask like, how do we do that? Or will we have the manpower and the capabilities, and will it work, and any of those things? And then I just threw that out there, and over the course of a weekend, people figured out like, we got to.
You just said, "Hey, Nick, figure it out."
Yeah, it was like a train, and Jason would train, and Nick, like that's what I mean is like 10 more people have been trained on how to do all this studio stuff, and people are hosting their own shows who never had before, and so we're just we're figuring out as we go, but it seems to be working. I think that's what everyone's got to do right now. It's just if you have the audience and people care, and I mean we're all Disney fans, so if we as Disney fans don't know what other Disney fans want to read or watch, there's a problem there. And I think that's what the problem a lot of other sites have is more often than not they don't understand their audience. I just think they're not us. They're not like the 4 people in here. I don't think they're quite as passionate, or they just don't get it. They don't spend enough time in the parks to get it, or I just don't think they make that connection with people, which is why I think that's all of our success is the fact that we are the people sitting at home, so we understand we just do what we would want to watch or we would want to read, you know?
I'd want to watch Disflix.
Hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
That was another great moment that the community, I have no part in that. That was another great moment the community mobilized and did something great, right? So
COVID-19 and Disflix have proved one thing, that a common enemy can unite us all. I saw people that hated each other on Tuesday. That stuff dropped on Wednesday. Also, something that everyone agrees on. Like that was amazing. And that had a
Josh as the one that was going to slip up.
Sorry, I've tried so hard.
Of all the words, that one's probably the most okay.
All right. I do apologize. I was trying to honor the rules, but yeah, that was a great moment of unity, and hopefully moving forward we can. I think this has been, not to get somewhat serious, but this whole COVID thing, it is somewhat like a Control-Alt-Delete on society. I think it's going to do a lot to help us appreciate what we take for granted. We live in an amazing country where capitalism has built some incredible enterprises that we can go and enjoy. And when they're taken away, you realize that is not an assured thing. And, I hope that, I hope that the fans will go and, put their money where their hearts are and spend money at these places and help kickstart the economy when all this ends.
Well, I think we're all
certainly do my part
outside at this point.
Yeah,
I'm an introvert, computer nerd, blacked out Windows kind of guy, and I'm ready to go outside. So I can only imagine that a normal person is absolutely ready to leave at this point.
I realize as I look, well, Josh is an exception, but Ben and Tom, the background of me is not exactly reflective of a Disney fan. I promise there are plenty of Disney movies in the Blu-ray towers behind me, but because you've heaped praise on, let's call him a friend, Derek Bergen earlier on in the show, I think you need to hold up the Shandu plush, and this is really an inside joke for him and me, because I had praised the character of Shandu from Sinbad's Storybook Voyage, and you've been to Tokyo a couple of times, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you have.
That's why I hate Disney World now. I've been to Tokyo a few times.
It is something, and we like to play the armchair Imagineering game, so I'm going to throw it out there. If you could take one attraction and realistically put it anywhere in Walt Disney World, because you've been to the parks around the world, what would you take and where would you put it?
Oh, God. If I was being selfish, I mean, definitely Sinbad's Storybook Voyage in the Morocco Pavilion at Epcot, but that's me being real selfish. The thing we probably need... Oh, man, that's tough. I don't know, because the thing I like having reasons to go to the other ones. I like when they have a unique identity. And the thing I typically don't like about Disney World is we don't have a lot of unique identity, or we've done a good job removing the things that give us a unique identity. And that's what Bears was mostly about. Bears was about, that's one of the few 1971 originals that was exclusive to Florida. It originated here. It's part of the character, the DNA of Walt Disney World. And Great Movie Ride's one of those things, and now it's gone for a ride that they're going to build. I don't know what's going to happen now with the pandemic, but at least they were planning on building everywhere else. So what does that do for Hollywood studios? You have a land that you could also see in California, and now a ride in the theater that's also going to be in Toontown at Disneyland. I don't know what that does.
The studios is always kind of like a best of park anyway. Really the unique ones, and it's why we're so protective of it, is Epcot and Animal Kingdom. And it's
I think Studios was
Tokyo
pretty unique to start, though. I think there was a lot of stuff you couldn't see anywhere else.
I've said it several times. It's always fascinated me that so many companies that operate, entertainment enterprises are trying to create differentiated offerings from what they have, which is generally commoditized and common. And Disney, with Walt Disney World in particular, has taken what was an incredibly unique and differentiated offering, and they have dumbed it down to being common, which you said earlier, and I agree with you, the company likes money. I like money too. It's hard to reconcile those two things, because why would you take away your differentiation? But that's what they continue to do.
You want parks that do not feel like the same thing, right? I mean, that was the driving
and they're not
force with every park they added was this is a completely different thing that the other parks don't offer.
Yep. To answer Tim's question, what I would do, I would take the new Tron attraction at Magic Kingdom and I would put it where the Speedway is because the placement of that ride makes absolutely no sense.
That's what Tom wanted to do.
You've got one attraction that makes noise and fumes. You've got another attraction that has an incredibly retro-futuristic, beautiful show building, and you hide it behind the most ugly, ununique attraction in the entire Disney portfolio.
And the worst part is, I didn't realize it was going to look that bad. Coming from Storybook Circus, that gray show building, they're not going to hide that. They ruined the circus, which is a shame.
They don't care about sightlines anymore.
The circus is so cute, and they ruined it.
One of the original
names. Tim and I are going to say the same thing right now. One of the proposed names for our podcast was the Sightlines Podcast because that's something that, again, the 4 people on this call and all the people that are probably listening, we care about that. It's one of the things that, it makes Disney so unique. It's not Busch Gardens where you park in a parking lot and you see everything in the park. And I hate these kind of decisions that destroy those because they're in the category of problems that are relatively unfixable. You could be sure for the next 30, 40, 50 years, that Tron building is going to be there. That's not going away. I guess they can paint it, what do they call it, go away green.
They're doing gray stripes on it. It's weird.
It's thankfully lower than the Guardians building, so ultimately, like the backside of Everest, it'll be hidden by trees in theory.
But Epcot is the park where sightlines usually don't matter because it is like that World's Fair thing. Like it doesn't, it's not great, but it's not Animal Kingdom or Magic Kingdom where it takes you out of anything. It's a collection of pavilions.
Other than kind of the bend at the Odyssey, you really couldn't see show buildings for things. Up until
you saw Spaceship Earth from World Showcase. That wasn't Epcot is a place.
Okay, so
Epcot is a
Spaceship Earth is an interesting building.
When I go to Magic Kingdom and I go to Frontierland, I'm in the Old West, so I shouldn't see things on our land. But at any point in Epcot, I'm not in those countries. I'm at Epcot, even in the story.
Right, but there's a big difference between Spaceship Earth and the Soarin' building, though.
Yeah, the Soarin' building, it's not pretty, but does it ruin Epcot? I don't know about that.
But I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy is taking that to the next level.
It's big. It's definitely very big.
It's a big cube.
It's not great, but on my list of, I think that if you told me I could fix one of those show building problems in Florida, I'd pick Tron.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as moving it in where the Speedway is, or
anything to not ruin the circus because I think it's a shame just to have this big gray box. Right at the end of the circuit. It just looks weird.
The new show buildings have any angle you want as long as they're 90 degrees. That seems to be what they have doubled down on.
But it's just that when they want to do it, they can. Like Galaxy's Edge, obviously, you don't have any sightline problems because Lucasfilm wouldn't allow it. But anything else they've done in any of the Disney-owned parks in the world lately, it's been very much just cramming it. Marvel, the Avengers campus has screwed up Cars Land in a lot of ways, which is a shame because it's a really cool land. There was no way around Tower of Terror. It was where it was. There was no way to hide Tower of Terror.
We could make it uglier. They could make it uglier.
Yeah, but in the end, I still think seeing Tower of Terror from a distance on Radiator Springs Racers and being on Mater's Junkyard Jamboree and seeing Web Industries are two different things. I don't know.
I think that park is taking a step back anyway, but it
was going in a good direction.
It definitely was.
Yeah.
Another suggestion for the Speedway from the chat was Tomorrow's Child suggesting Aquatopia taking over the Speedway. I love that ride. It's a small B-ticket attraction out in Disney Sea.
It's fun
I'd gladly
to look
take that
at.
over the Speedway. I like it.
I don't know about riding it, but it's fun to look at.
It's certainly better to look at than the Speedway.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
And it probably takes up an eighth of the space of the Speedway, so it's not like it would replace the entire thing.
Yeah,
but
that's cute.
So
cute ride.
So your answer is moving. What did you say? The Sinbad Storybook Voyage.
It's a self. But like I said, I thought about all the other things we don't have that I'd love to have here, and I just I'd rather just go see them where they belong, almost. I
Okay.
don't know.
I think Sinbad can make sense in Epcot. I mean, it
It makes
not
better
really a
sense
rockin'
than
story, but it's-
Frozen does in Norway.
Yeah.
It's an actual cultural tale, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, that's
yeah.
if you could sell a fictional character that didn't exist in a fictional world that didn't exist in a country that does, you could certainly sell the Sinbad move.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you?
Absolutely.
What
And even if
what's
you
your
can't,
answer
you're
to
Disney,
that?
you just do it anyway.
What is everyone else's answer?
I was
to
actually
that?
like, Ben, you didn't answer. Ben froze.
I think that. I was gonna say,
There we go.
He
very
unfroze.
happy
Froze.
looking.
I froze.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, you are. Your mustache stayed in
Okay,
place,
I
though.
think I'm back. My quarantine stash.
Ben, yeah, did you have an answer to the question? This is Killer Pod, by the way.
Phantom Manor. I love that. Although we have our haunted mansion obviously back here, I would love to see something along the lines of that. Mystic Manor as well. But honestly, when I go back and watch ride videos, I kind of lean with Tom. Sinbad has been always the one that's kind of caught my eye. That especially the second iteration of it, that I would love to see that attraction somewhere here in the stateside. Mainly because I don't know when I'll get over to those side of those parks over there.
I'm going to throw this out here, Tom. I've said it on our show. You're a fan of Pandora, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think, because the rumor, or at least not necessarily even rumor, I think it was at one point back in 2008, that a version of Mysterious Island was going to go roughly where Pandora went.
Oh yeah.
Do you think Pandora is a better fit for Animal Kingdom than Mysterious Island would be?
I like that it is a thing that only exists at Disney World, and I think it is the same way Mystic Manor is the reason I would tell someone to go to Hong Kong. Pandora is near the top of the list for reasons I would tell people to come here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic area. I think when the collective masses went into it, they're saying if they're going to do this with Pandora about Avatar, a movie that doesn't have the franchise appeal that Star Wars does, it gave us significant hope for Star Wars Land. And while the rollout wasn't necessarily successful to the extent that they wanted it to be, you can't really argue with Rise of the Resistance.
Yeah, I mean it's one great ride. I still don't know how I feel about the rest of it. I think they made some bad choices.
And we talked about this on here. I assumed erroneously that the choices that were made to go with the most recent trilogy was a creative one, not an executive mandate, which surprised me.
Yeah, I think Lucasfilm screwed up. I blame Lucasfilm for sure. I don't. The only things you blame on management, I think, are the entertainment cuts. It's the only thing that was made by Chapek really was to cut that stuff away. But the creative decisions of what the original planet's going to be and what we're going to do, I think.
I think that was largely Trowbridge. I don't even know that it's. I mean, yes, he's working with Lucasfilm, but I think it was largely Trowbridge.
They won the original concept was they were going to do Endor and Tatooine, and they were going to have the speeder bike ride, and you could actually go to Jabba's palace and the real cantina on Tatooine, and I think it was a number of things. I think number one, I think Iger liked having his trilogy more. I think he's like, oh, this is what we're doing, and this is ours, and this is the new thing. I think Lucasfilm sometimes is their own worst enemy. I think instead of designing something for everybody, they design something for people who specifically have watched all the movies, watched the Clone Wars, watched Rebels, read comic books. Like, if you've done all of those things, I think you are blown away with everything in the land. And I think if you're a person who's only seen the movies, I think you walk through and you're like, well, this is pretty, and they did a great job, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in here.
One of the other things we mentioned on last show, or the second to last show that we did, the objection that people had to it going into Disneyland, I couldn't come up with a definitive reason. Nobody could articulate it other than we don't like change. Until I heard somebody say Disneyland is like idealized versions of whatever the theme of the land is, and this is a literal war zone that they're putting in the middle of Disneyland. So it does kind of step away from that, and that might be why it feels off. We talk about how everything in Imagineering is part of the nonlinear storytelling of a ride, of a land, of a park. And when something like that doesn't necessarily vibe with the rest of the park, you can run into problems like that where it doesn't necessarily feel right and you can't explain it.
I think it's simpler than that. I think it's scale. I think it's just the scale. I think you walk out of Galaxy's Edge, like back into New Orleans Square, and everything, instead of charming, just feels small. It just makes, it throws off the scale of the whole park.
Does having a Monte Cristo help that? Like, bring you back into New Orleans Square?
I was going to get to go there tomorrow for the first time, but, like, my trip got canceled. And
but, like, I think it works there. Like, I think Disneyland needed to add an e-ticket. I think they needed an e-ticket. And that park is the right thing. It's the right combination of really great museum pieces that still are really charming and people love, with newer things that will wow anybody. And I think it was time to put something new in, and whether or not it coherently jives with the rest of the park, I think it's nice that they finally have another e-ticket in there.
Do you think then the other suggestion was to take Star Wars, take Marvel, and have those be the anchor for a third gate? And I know realistically money is actually an object, and the infrastructure for a third gate would double the cost of what they're putting into both of those things probably. But just creatively, would that be what you would have liked to see, or are you okay with the angle that they went?
I'm more okay with Star Wars than I am with Marvel.
Well, Marvel doesn't make sense for a park called California Adventure. But
no, and it did if it was in the Hollywood section, but you're making like a fake campus.
That Hollywood section has been stripped bare basically since they took out Superstar Limo, which nobody's lamenting, mind you. Yeah. But like it was a disconnected area from the outset. So
yeah, it was the one land they really didn't fix, and so I don't know why you didn't just try to fix that instead. But I think it got too late. I think they spent all that money on that Frozen show, and someone's like, well, we're not only going to get 2 years out of that Frozen show.
Not a good replacement.
Personally, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to theme a whole gate around a single film franchise, particularly when you look at what the company's done. It seems that what they want to be able to do is shoehorn attractions in wherever they want in order to load balance the park. So, you talk about putting Frozen into World Showcase being a disruption to the theme of world culture. Imagine if you had an entire park that was dedicated to an entire film. You would literally have to either completely undermine what it stood for, or be limited to that.
That wasn't what I was advocating. Just to be clear, I wasn't
in my
advocating
nature to misunderstand.
I think you were saying anchoring.
I was thinking, it would be similar to how Universal is doing their Epic Most Woke Park, where they've got 4 or 5 different IPs that are blended together, with Nintendo kind of being the anchor IP of that.
I think Islands of Adventure always had problems because of that. Islands of Adventure was the first park that really did all like IP lands.
And there was no real common thread other than like literature, kind of.
Yeah, and I think it just presented a lot of problems over time for them. I think like Harry Potter busting into Jurassic Park, basically now there's like a Kong attraction on Jurassic Park. Like, I don't know what's going on anymore.
It's not that hard to put yourself into the board meeting where that idea happened too, because you have to imagine, like, well, these are the 5 IPs that we want to use. How do we do it? How do we blend them? And somebody's like, what if we put them all on islands? Yeah. I mean, it's not hard to imagine what the provenance of that was, but actually implementing it in a way that not only works in the beginning but scales. That's the thing, is if you're going to spend $1 billion on something, it can't just be good when it opens. It has to be scalable. Yeah. And that's the thing that when I look at the Walt Disney World parks in particular, that's really where they've struggled. It's, the original Imagineer for all of those parks, maybe the studios excluded, was nailed. I mean, it was a beautiful masterpiece of art. It was a piece of art you could go experience. But when it got turned over to ops, And when they started to, either have to make it deal with the crowd levels that they had or expand it, that's where things have historically come off the tracks with these parks. So I definitely think that the initial concept has to be pretty in tune to the needs of the future in order for it to hold up over time. Do you know?
Have you ever booed in a Parks and Resorts presentation?
I know I have.
It's a situation where, again, we talk about uniting the community. When Josh's dialogue goes over our head, I just change the topic. It's a lot easier. It's rather than trying to digest or respond with 50% of the intellect, we just change the topic. It's how we operate on our show.
See, I think I'm the dummy.
Would you consider the Disney response on the Parks blog like a feather in your cap when you got the unscrupulous nickname?
I have used that word so much. Obviously, I was really upset in the moment because at that point, after the story finally went public, that's when I heard from a ton of people, and whether it was cast members at Bears, people in WDI, people started coming out of the woodwork being like, "Oh, I'm glad you guys put this out because it was coming," and that's when it became. So I did only have one source, but it was a source that again had proven through a very long period of time to be always correct. But again, I told you before, with Bears, we sat on Bears for weeks. I think it might have even been a couple months deciding what we were going to do, because I think the fear was, if we run too early, it gives them a chance to change the plans, but that's what we want. There was a lot of that decision of, do we try to change the story? Do we just try to give people the information?
For a very long period of time to be always correct.
What am I hearing in the background?
It's not us.
Damn it, Nick. The objectionable part for me to all of that is, and I've got to say it on here because I'm going to get called out if I don't, is the Who We Are article. And my website is effectively built to audit things like that. When you put out the various stories that you broke, I don't think that was the right move. I think doing a heartfelt thing, which is how that article started out, about the various people that work for you and praising the philanthropy that you did, nobody can take that away from you. When there's a bit of chest pounding, that contributes to who is Tom on Twitter, who is Tim making him out to be, and not just singling myself out here.
I can see how it gets construed that way, but you got to remember the exact words in their article were unscrupulous sources. To me, that's saying these guys just make stuff up. And I wanted to be clear with all these people who are saying all you do is make stuff up, where I'm like, that's not accurate. Here's a list of things that certainly were not made up.
You could have had a shorter list, because I was able to poke holes in some of those.
But here's the thing, Tim, and this is not a knock on you whatsoever. We can go back and forth all day on whether something was on WDW Magic forums first, or whether I had it first, or whatever. The thing is, if I'm not looking, and we could argue all day whether I read those forums or not. I'm going to tell you, I haven't read those forums since I was on them. And that was many, many years ago.
The issue is that time is irrefutable. So if something happens...
So I understand your point. I'm not taking away your point that maybe they were there first. I'm not going to argue that. If you have a timestamp, and we have a timestamp on my article, you're obviously not wrong if you went and looked. I'm not saying you are. I'm just telling you that when I put that article together, I am not going up and down WDW Magic to be like, did we actually have that? I'm saying... things usually would get to me. After a certain amount of time, I'm going to hear for someone, oh, did you hear what they said on Magic? Those are things that, to my knowledge, when I posted them, I had not heard anyone else talk about them. Right. I had not seen them anywhere.
So we talked about that, about Runaway Railway, that you were the first to put that out there. That was absolutely circulating. You were the first to be confident enough in the story to put it out there. But to your point, that these types of things, it's like a joke where Joe Rogan was the joke police if somebody stole somebody else's material. In some cases, it's a joke that Carlos Mencia got ripped off, or was told that he ripped off. Yeah. Who's going to build the wall on the Mexican border? That's just a joke that is an easy joke to make, and a dozen other comedians made it. In this case, you probably have similar sources, if not identical sources, to the likes of Jim Hill, to the likes of the various people over at WDW Magic. So I'm not disputing that. What I am calling attention to are things like you pointed your attention to the Guardians of the Galaxy ride coming to Mission Space. Like you linked to that actual article that was incorrect on WDWNT in that Who We Are article. Things like that. Where, all right,
and that was one where, like, 2 days later, we then posted, like, oh, no, it turns out it's actually Universe Energy.
I got a quick question for you, Tom.
Like, certainly sometimes you hear rumors, and sometimes they're not completely accurate, and I think my sources in 2014 were different from my sources in 2016 through 2020.
That's the nature of just what you're doing.
What do you, just out of curiosity, do you have any sense of what compels an insider with the Disney company to actually be a source? Because you have to figure some of these people have very, jobs that a lot of people would aspire to have, and they're ostensibly risking them to leak. I mean, is it a sense of wanting to change what the company's decision is? Is it just ego or some combination? I'm just curious what you think.
I think people are passionate and they get excited about seeing how people react to what they're working on. I think number two is, I think there's a thrill. There's a thrill to, like, causing an uproar and, mass hysteria in this. I will tell you honestly, like, I miss the days of announcing attractions and I'd plan it for weeks and I double check with sources and then I know, like, all right, tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm dropping that new ride. And there's an excitement. You watch, like, I just sit there and I'd watch Twitter and Facebook and you watch people react, and it's absolutely fun and it's absolutely thrilling. And I'm sure it's the same way for the source. I couldn't imagine it isn't. And then the third thing I think is there's things like Bears where people in the company are passionate like we are, but they become concerned, and there's very little they can do otherwise. And I think that was, whether it was someone in WDI with Country Bears or whether it was sometimes just people in operations who got worried about, like, the parking fees at the resorts or those other things where, like, you should really get this out early and see what happens kind of thing.
That happens all over.
To your knowledge, has any source that you have ever suffered any repercussions for being a leaker? If you're willing to answer that, and if not, I'm trying to read your face through the webcam here.
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I can answer it because I've had a situation similar. And I think Josh and Ben might know the details of this. And I also recognize that I probably have a larger audience than we're used to, so I'm going to choose my words quite carefully. I had information from somebody, not necessarily directly in Disney, but in the supply chain of building attractions. Had the information and it was spot on, and I passed it along to the wrong person. And then, Tom, you mentioned not wanting to put blueprints out there. That's exactly what this person did. Blueprints leaked. I decided that I'm not going to risk this person's job because I want to get information on a story. It was a fantastic source, but it's not worth anybody losing their job for us getting clicks on a website. Yeah. It's just not.
And that's not ever the intention, though. I think that the thing is, like, I've always, like, I never solicited anybody. I've never asked for anything. People would send stuff, and I'd be like, is this to share or is this for me to enjoy? And they'd be like, it's for you to share. And I'd be like, you sure? I'm sure. That was always the conversation. Because I understood if people wanted to share stuff with me for fun, I appreciate that too. And there certainly were people. And they're like, yeah, just don't post it. I'd be like, oh, cool. It's cool to see. And then some people were like, no, I want this shared. And then, I mean.
Okay. So
I mentioned Apple earlier.
Good.
I mentioned Apple earlier because there's some interesting parallels between reporting on them and Disney. And one thing that company's well known to do is to intentionally give false information to employees they have working on a project and they'll use different false information for a variety of people, so that if it ever becomes public, they actually know who the leak was. Do you have any sense that Disney does that?
Oh yeah,
they absolutely do. They did it with Mice Chat.
What specifically happened with Mice Chat? Do we know which story?
I don't know specifically, but my understanding is that either Tony Baxter or somebody in Tony Baxter's office was leaking things their way, and they used a Pixar tool, and that was something that John Lasseter would suggest, where you plant a bogus story through the people that you suspect. It's very, very common.
See where it comes out.
Baseball fans know this gets done through Peter Gammons all the time, or did back in the day. Just very, very common things. I think Troy Porter might have been the source there. That's a little bit of a deep cut if anybody's paying attention. Is
that a baseball joke?
So it's the same story, but you change tiny details.
You change enough of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or you tell you tell a concept with subtle tweaks to a few different people and see which one actually gets out if you have suspicions.
That's the Freddy Krueger dream suite at the Contemporary turned out not to be the actual plan.
Exactly.
One of my favorites was Incredible Steakhouse, and people said you're just being insane. And then those Incredible test rooms started, and people are like, God damn it.
Part of the problem, and you're facing this, is we asked if the company is tone deaf, and they kind of are. They are. And they'll throw stuff like that out there that just seems so ridiculous to us as fans. And if it's passed along to you as news or as information, we can't help but question it because of some of the stupidity of it. I mean, a Toy Story marionette show replacing Country Bear Jamboree seems ridiculous, especially when they were building Toy Story Land at the same time.
Yeah. But you have to remember who management is, and I think the people in WDI and management and everything, I think, have the same reaction, but they're not in charge. So somebody's making these calls,
Josh,
I mean, if in 1998 someone said they were going to erect a magic wand over Spaceship Earth, you probably would have dismissed that as being non-credible, but they did it.
Giant sorcerer's had to block the Chinese theater.
Yeah, there's a lot of
interesting evolution of that one.
Or that they're going to have a roller coaster burst out of the face of Spaceship Earth.
Yep.
The time coaster, whatever they call it.
Time racers.
What was that supposed? Time racers. Yep.
Time racers.
Thank God that didn't happen.
Do you think Spaceship Earth redo is part of this likely hatchet job?
God, I hope so.
Me too. That's one of the scariest announcements that I've heard.
Yep.
This is kind of putting you on here, and again, you might bite your tongue here. Do you have any insight to the fears that us, as well as members of the fan community, had about there being IP integration to Spaceship Earth as part of the larger scale redo?
I mean, you can see it in just the stuff they've previewed. It's light, but it's there. So if you go in Epcot Experience, there's the lanterns which is basically right out of Tangled. So there's the lanterns. If you tie that together with what we saw at Expo, which is the manta ray that looks like Moana's grandmother, I mean, if you put that together, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to tell this history of storytelling, but at the same time, there's going to be these weird nods to Disney IP moments, Yeah,
which sounds like what Harmonious is going to be as well. But
I think Harmonious is just Happily Ever After on the water base. It's basically Happily Ever After if occasionally you change the language the songs are sung in.
Okay.
They just need to redo the descent on Spaceship Earth and never touch that thing again.
Yeah.
Leave that thing alone. It's the one vestige of my childhood that's not been plundered.
Yeah. I'm on board with changing the score. I'm on board with changing the narrator.
Narration can go away.
I'm not on board with restaging every scene. I don't like what they showed for the Egypt scene, which is okay, well, the pharaoh's going to go away. We're gonna put the woman in power, and we're gonna redress the pharaoh, and he's gonna sit over here and be carving into this bowl.
We're gonna have the woman chasing the pharaoh.
Change sake.
So now it's it's female empowerment, so we got to redo this whole scene, and she's going to be the power figure, and So why do you got to restage these scenes? They're fine.
It's PC run amok.
Tom, when was your first trip to any of the Disney parks?
I was 4 months old, December of '88.
Okay, so Disney World, I assume?
Yeah, I didn't go to Disneyland until 2009. It was way, way, way later.
So as a kid, in the 90s then, what was your favorite park?
Epcot.
Okay.
Good man.
And you probably
All I
had
wanted to do was
Epcot.
ride Figment and Spaceship Earth. Yeah.
So I guess
Well,
up until
90s.
maybe you were 11, it was Epcot Center, effectively.
It was Epcot Center until, 90?
99,
93.
2000, right?
93, right? Epcot 93.
Okay, well,
Yeah, they changed it to Epcot 94.
it still had vestiges of Epcot Center before, like, World of Motion was taken away and Horizons went seasonal and those sorts of things. They might have changed the name to Epcot 94, but it was basically the same park with a different logo.
Yeah.
All right, good talk. I'll see you out there.
All right.
Controversially,
That's what
I don't
I thought it was.
For.
I don't dislike 90s Epcot.
I think the 90s Epcot
No, I
was
think-
very good.
Yeah.
I think they
think
saw
early
where
to
it needed
mid-90s
evolve
Epcot was the
and
peak.
Execute. Yeah, I mean,
That wand was the
I-
harbinger of trouble.
I think they
I
recognized
was
that
over at
Epcot needed
MGM
to
while y'all were at
evolve
Epcot.
with its 3 rides.
Yep.
I think they recognized that
2
Epcot
hour
needed to
tours.
evolve, and it didn't effectively evolve, and that was the problem, and that's why it's Construction Wall City now. They did piecemeal changes, Band-Aid solutions, and they didn't properly evolve the park as it needed to.
Yeah.
There was a couple of hits, and like all of our podcasts, this degenerates into Epcot Center was better than current day Epcot. That seems
Well,
to be
I mean,
par for the course for.
I mean, I think Epcot Center was home to what I consider to be, and I think you can almost, as close to objectively state as you can, Horizons was probably the best themed attraction that's ever been built anywhere in the world. I mean, it was certainly in its time. It was unprecedented. It was impactful. It tied the entire park together. It was a perfect thesis statement. And, the degree to which it tied that park together was evident by what happened once it went away. I've said this before, one of the things that I think made Disney successful in their parks endeavors in the beginning was that they had a lot of confidence in their visitors. And we can joke all we want about visitors being stupid, and certainly there's no shortage of people who would, satisfy that thesis. But people are also smarter than we give them credit for. And there's a lot of readability and depth that when you are willing to trust that people are willing to pick up on things that are subtle, you can do a lot of things creatively that you can't do if you're just trying to make a quick buck by, doing a book report attraction off the latest flick.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of that today, which is just, it's going to appeal to people that are, really, really hot on the current thing. But what's it going to be in 10 years? That's always been my fear. It's what drove me to get involved in these podcasts, is to hopefully be a voice that says, look, Disney, trust the quality of the depth of the stories that you have and appeal to people. What makes a good attraction is the same thing that makes a good movie, which is that you touch people in a way that makes them feel good. IP can be a ride, it can be a movie. It's a good idea that is executed in a way that connects with people.
Yeah, you can have a great IP ride as well as you can have a great, original idea. I think
quality just needs to win out.
Pooh's
That's
Honey
all.
Hunt is spectacular, and it doesn't bother me.
I mean, Pirates.
It's done well.
Pirates. A good attraction can lead to a film just as well as a film can lead to an attraction. We have, Haunted Mansion might not be. Pretty sure that wasn't the greatest film, but certainly, Pirates was an incredibly compelling attraction, and then it was an enormously successful film series.
And then became an attraction based on that film series in Shanghai.
Which is a piece.
What I really want to see is management that I want to see management
I think you're on an island by
trust the
yourself.
creatives
I have
enough to let them build attractions. Give the attraction people the same kind of budgets that you're willing to give the film people, and see what happens. Yeah. And I think we could see a new renaissance in themed entertainment.
They're certainly capable. Look what WDI does when Oriental Land Company throws the money at them. They can still do anything.
Yep.
I am whenever it does open with all the delays now, going to be fascinated by what ultimately comes with the Guardians attraction, simply because that budget is ridiculous. I'm sure you've seen it. I've heard numbers upwards of 400 plus.
It was supposed to be $1 billion.
That seems insane. The
then
numbers
they cut
that I saw,
everything physical out of it.
but I mean, we did some math, and like, what is the most expensive
including buzzing
roller coaster just for the track itself is what, $40 million, and you're spending $450 million on there. I mean, there is quite a bit of stuff that has to go in there. And don't get me wrong, Imagineering can spend money as inefficiently as any entity in the world, but $450 million is a ridiculous amount of money.
Well, they found out, number one, that it cost them more to keep the old building than if they had knocked it down.
Even then, I can't imagine that's, again, who knows how they spend their money, but putting $450 million into a roller coaster when the track itself can't cost much more than 35 to 40 million is insane.
Well, buildings are expensive. There's a reason, there's no indoor coasters at Six Flags, right? I mean, it's because the building is the expensive part.
Plus the exterior theming, that just doesn't grow on a. That paint is very expensive.
DSNY newscast.
You know what? I'll give him some credit. He'll properly source things. He'll at least do that and has decent production value. Yeah. So I'll give him some credit there.
I like when he copies and pastes my whole article and doesn't change the wording, so all my fancy writing remains on his show. It's my favorite.
There, he's giving you credit. What more do you want?
He doesn't give me credit. I don't get credit. And anytime I point it out, it's no. And I'm like, this is the article. This is my sentence.
Well, the times that I've referenced your articles on my site, I have always linked back to them.
Yeah, no,
for whatever that's worth.
It's very kind. Even though we have our differences, I appreciate that you're still willing to source.
Yes.
I'm licensed to practice law in Florida, so if you want to sue anybody, just let me know. I've got time.
Oh, I think I've been talked out of suing anybody.
I just want.
What about Tim?
I want to know what Nick's been up to the last 2 hours.
Nick, are you still with us? Hop on mic.
Well, Nick's just running stuff.
Nick, you there?
He is.
We do have a quote from somebody in chat.
Hey guys.
There he is.
Nick.
I am playing Animal Crossing and drinking bourbon. So.
It sounds like you're drinking bourbon. I think, Tom, you need to invest in a better microphone for Nick.
Well, he's at home. I mean, the reason I'm here is all the expensive crap is here, so,
We have a request from chat. John CF said, I started watching because I listened to Marty Called, but I stayed watching because of Ben's porn stash, waiting for the pizza delivery man to knock on his door. Ben, can you go get the door, please?
Well, Ben is actually recording from his van.
My wife being tonight, I told her
Oh, you guys have a guy that has a van.
I told her
too,
I'd
Nick.
shave after
we joked that
appearing
Nick
on the
has
show
a
tonight.
van.
Well, with that mustache, he needs to have a van. Free candy.
Does it say free candy, free kittens? What are we advertising here?
Candy.
Candy, okay. Ben, what do you go with? Candy or kittens? This time delay is great for the podcast.
Kittens, because I know.
I just like riding in
I go with cats just for Josh.
Okay. As I'm looking at the clock, I don't know how long these things run, Tom. Are we just talking until you're done, or what?
They run as long as we want them to run.
Perfect.
So if you guys want to start taking some questions from the chat or something, whatever.
I'll put Ben's phone number out there. We can have people just calling Ben.
Hey.
Did they accidentally put his phone number on the Walt Disney World website to call to fix your annual pass problem?
Actually, that was a question that I had for you. That's a good segue. Again, I do this as a hobby. You do this as a profession, and I get my fair share of people thinking that I'm Disney. How often do you get those emails? Do you get those tweets where they're yelling at you for a problem? And what are some of the better ones that you've received?
Why do you think the WDW Today Twitter account no longer exists?
I'm sure that's part of it. Yeah.
Well, we existed first, so I don't think they had. There wasn't a good reason to come after us about it, even though they were similar. I think just because we existed several years before that account, and so I think eventually they just gave up. But we would get a ton of cast compliments. We'd always get those. Like every day, we get like 5 or 6 of those hashtag cast compliments. But otherwise, we get yelled at like, I haven't got my money back for my trip I canceled, and always stuff like that. And I'd be like, we're not Disney. This is an unofficial fan site. And then people never responded. There's never like, oh, I'm sorry or anything. It's just you leave that and then they go away.
I had an Indian company wanting to speak with Bob Chapek about an investment in an India theme park.
Oh.
So I responded. I engaged back and forth on that one for a little bit, so we can move this.
Tim actually got $250 million.
No, never a corporation, never like an entity. Always just like people with vacation problems.
It very well could have been somebody that was just a fisher, but it wasn't. Yeah. It read like somebody representing an India company looking to invest money into a Disney theme park in India. So that's our spoiler alert.
Three Asian princes, Tim has learned his lesson.
Yes. So I'm out $10,000, but aside from that,
what's the holdup getting the Woo back in Universal Florida?
We're working on that.
I didn't know he wasn't allowed there.
I'm not sure if I can comment on this or not.
That's fine. Don't.
Let's just say
probably not.
I've abstained.
Abused attorney-client privilege by saying that he was a client.
He has
you give up a source, and Josh will say.
Adam has specifically told me that I could comment on this.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, Adam is what I consider to be an extraordinarily low-threat person. He's about the nicest guy you could ever want to meet. He's extraordinarily respectful. And I think the odds of him ever, violating the terms of admission to any theme park are about 0. So I have absolutely no problem going to bat for him, and will continue to do so. He's salt of the earth, great guy.
I haven't officially met him, but I have. The Hollywood Studios anniversary last year, I brought out. I have the silver MGM jacket, and I had it out. And he came up, I was like, oh, that jacket's really cool. And he filmed a bit, so I'm on that episode of his show. But we never introduced ourselves to each other. It's weird, but yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I will say this. I mean, and I since I have a forum with a big audience, I'll say this. I understand there's a lot of gravitas to being a YouTuber, and there's a lot of people that are doing backstage exploring and stuff. As a person who has represented a bunch of people that have gotten caught up in this, if you are on the fence about doing that, just don't. Yeah. Just behave yourself, because especially now, the odds of getting back in, I think, are extraordinarily low. Yeah. Universal in particular seems to have very little interest in even hearing the story. Yeah. Just behave yourself. All the videos out there, we've all seen backstage. There's a billion videos of the Utilidors online. If you were one of the pioneers back in the day who did it, I'm grateful, because that's part of what drew me into the community. I've always been fascinated with that stuff. I've never worked for the company, so I'm glad that stuff exists. But there's absolutely 0.0 reason to risk your future to go in there for the rest of your life to get this now, because it's information we already have. Just don't do it. Behave yourself. Yeah. End of spiel.
Next question was, I'm a college student. Any tips to moving to Orlando? Josh, you can speak intelligently about Sausage Castle.
Don't. Why not?
No, you can't. I was born and raised Floridian. I spent 35 years in Florida. I moved to Indiana. The people here are nicer, but Florida is a great place. Central Florida has all the things in the world to do. As far as tips to do it, yeah, just do it. That's my tip. Live the life you want to live. You want to move to Orlando, move to Orlando. If you're waiting for a time where it's going to be super easy and a chest of money falls in your lap, that's never going to happen. Just go do what you want to do. Done.
Tom, are you hiring?
Not right now.
There you go.
6 months from now, Tom, are you hiring? when the school season starts in September, in theory.
Depends on how much bourbon Nick drinks. There might be an opening tomorrow.
Wow.
We had a question here for myself. This is self-serving. What went through your head when Iger took offense to your Everest article tweet? I laughed. That was you talked feather in the cap. I thought it was funny, but it's frustrating because I think there was legit unknown about what the theme of certain attractions that are under his watch are, and I that in itself is more frustrating than anything, because I think there is a legit disconnect, or there was a legit disconnect between Iger and the parks. So that's really where that frustration came down.
Any questions for Ben's mustache?
Yeah, Ben's mustache? Any questions? Nothing? Okay.
I wouldn't have been able to
No, that's good.
the stash. I was there pre-mustache.
Anybody get any of that?
Nope.
Yeah, that's an unemployed mustache right there.
I'm back. Sorry. That is.
Don't walk into a job interview with that mustache, unless it's one industry in particular.
People are saying you should do a vidcast now.
That sounds like a lot of work for Tim. we frown on that type of thing. Again, there is a big difference between Tom doing this as a profession and us doing this as a hobby. I mean,
and also we're idiots.
Fairly true. The tech savvy side of things is Josh, and the willingness of Josh to help on the tech side of things is relatively low. So,
well, I mean, we started as a hobby. This didn't make profit for the first 8 years, and then it suddenly started, and that's when we were able to do things.
So what was actually that's another good question, and you've probably answered this before. But what gave you the confidence to make the leap from effectively quitting your day job to doing this full time, to saying that you could do this and survive doing this?
There was just enough money, and I felt like if I had my full time to spend on the website and was making more content, then there should be more money. So if there was what I felt was a safe amount of money for me to jump to full time, and I felt like, well, you can only go up from here. Like, I can't see that. I can't understand why there would be a significant downtick if I'm working more on the website, if I have more time to do more content. It didn't make sense. The time was just right.
This is something that Ben can probably weigh in on. Did you speak with anybody like Ricky to see somebody that had done this as their occupation, and the fatigue, the perhaps like you get jaded by the parks, any of those concerns, do they creep in?
I didn't have to talk to Ricky. When Ricky would come into Theme Park Connection, you could see it on Ricky's face. You could see that he was done. He didn't want to deal with it anymore. But he looked like, the thing with Ricky was when he moved on, he looked like he was very happy with what he was moving on to. But that's just how I read him, like coming in from like when he would come in around the time he was getting out of it, and then after he was out of it, he seemed very happy. I understand that. Like it does get taxing, and I mean I feel like I've aged 10 years in the last year, so I get it. And there are days where I'd like to walk away from it, but I think we have a responsibility. I think every other big site is on the media list, and I think there needs to be somebody who's willing to just be honest.
Speaking of being honest, do you have any salacious TPC?
This is why you guys should not do a video cast, by the way.
We do this when there's no video.
What I was going to ask is, do you have any salacious theme park connection stories you'd be willing to share?
Salacious?
Does that always seem like a...
Salacious.
That just seemed like a bizarre
stories. I don't know which ones I can tell or not. I have no idea.
What is the most obviously stolen item that you saw walk in there that you're willing to talk about?
I will be completely honest with you. We did all the paperwork like any pawn shop. And like sometimes Disney security came in and they looked at stuff, and sometimes they took stuff, but we had the paperwork and everything, and we'd always work with them. I will say the company's just bad at reclaiming its property. Like there's a certain number of days at which you own your cast costume if they don't ask you back for it. There's a time limit on that cast costume, and eventually that person just owns it. And so like they knew, and it's sometimes people came in early and we'd be like, hey, no, you've only been gone for however many days. We're not interested. That's not your property. So we try to help people too, but no, like honestly.
So last question. How much
honestly,
did you get
like
for
things
busing?
might have been, but the problem I think is so many of those people got stuff just because they were told to take stuff. So there's so many people in Imagineering you talk to where it was just like, oh, we were working on the mansion refurb, and I came one day and they were throwing out all the handrails from the staircase scene because they ripped it apart the night before. They're sitting in the dumpster. So I took one home. You know? Were they supposed to take one home? Probably not. Did anyone care that they did? No. You know, that kind of thing.
It's interesting. I'll admit.
Everybody at once. Josh, I'll give you a chance to answer your question because it's a good one. But quick question, because you hinted at it. What is, do you guys have to operate as a pawn shop rules, like where you have to hold things for 30 days?
We did all that same paperwork, yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Josh, go.
It's interesting to hear from someone on the inside of that because I've never understood how it all worked and just survived as long as it did. So it's interesting to me. You answered a question that I've asked a billion times.
That it didn't survive longer. I think it was I loved my job. That's what I think I like that more than even what I do now because I've always had a passion for the stuff. So like I love merchandise to begin with, but then also to just have some of the coolest stuff came through that door. I handled, we put most of a hydrolator back together. We had the Indiana Jones adventure model. The whole thing was sitting in the back one day. I used to eat my breakfast in the Monsters Inc. cab. Well, we had that for a couple months. I was just sitting there and had my coffee in the morning. And I had a Starjet dropped on my head at one point. 3 people were carrying a Starjet, and one guy let go, and it bonked me on the head. Yeah, it was cool to be around that stuff. And then
cool.
like the Switzerland proposal book and that Disney Mountain proposal thing, and that when that stuff would come in, there's just so much cool stuff out there, and you never knew what someone had and what they were going to bring in that day. It was. I mean, I like being my own boss, but there was something cool about that environment.
Getting back to the costume point that you made, the security shirt that I wore during the media night party of the opening of Rock and Roller Coaster that may or may not be in the closet that I had like 2 feet from me right now. It's legally mine now. Am I good with that? If it might still be in my possession?
It is. I wouldn't wear it to a park. That's the thing I'd say. Like, you're fine to own them, but don't wear them to a park. They get real pissy about that.
I can't fit in that thing 20 years later, so don't worry. I won't be wearing it to a park.
I've got a bunch of missized cast stuff that I've purchased over the years. They just didn't have my size in. I just bought just to have it, so I get it.
I have a pair of the red Chuck Taylor Converse that we used to wear at Muppet Vision. I forgot to turn those in one night, so those are still in the collection.
Yeah, those are yours.
Are they sitting behind you?
No, they're up in the attic. The few things are near me, but those are in the attic.
It does look like there's red Converse right there.
No, those are some Jordans.
Those are New Balance.
No.
He's got his display of Skechers behind him. Josh, you had another question that we talked over about one missing animatronic.
I was just asking how much you got for Buzzy. I was trying just to make a horrible joke.
Oh, Buzzy!
I did see a tweet go by. I never really followed up on it, but someone alleging to be from Disney Security said that they had found it. Did you guys see that, or did I dream that?
I saw the tweet.
This was about 3 days ago. Yeah, I don't know either. What a story that is. Have you had interactions? Have you had interactions with that individual as far as interviewing him or anything? The alleged absconder of Buzzy and his attire?
Well, I think the attire and the animatronic has been established are two completely separate things. He never had the animatronic. The clothes vanished before the animatronic, right? Isn't that the story?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gary Hall and I interviewed him he basically confessed to us that he was involved in that before the news story even broke, and then it happened. So we sort of, that was the closest thing to a breaking story I've ever had.
Yeah.
But that's been fascinating to watch. I mean, you know, I'm into the stuff like you are, but you know, I don't condone that. And
that was
I think
a thing.
that
was one story where we had it, but I didn't want to run it because I didn't want to be involved.
Yeah,
people in the company knew. There were plenty of people in the company who had heard like that it wasn't there and that people were looking for it. And I was like, I'm not touching this with a 45-foot pole. I'm not.
Yeah.
I will wait until the news says it or whatever, but I don't want any involvement in this. Because like I said, like I think, I always thought the ride rumors and stuff felt innocent to me. I think when you get into like theft and stuff, that's a whole different realm I don't want to be involved in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as soon as you put it out there, you get questions at your door.
Yeah, no, it's like, have you heard this? And I'm like, no, I hadn't, but God, I'm not posting it.
Yeah, it was a fascinating story, though. I mean, I hope it deters other people from doing that stuff because, although I do say that I'm pretty disappointed with how Disney handles those relics. I'd love to see them preserved and have some care shown for them. But that doesn't, you know, as I watched that story unfold and watched, you know, this person and others interacting on Twitter, a lot of them said, well, you know, he's doing the world a service because Disney's not preserving them. Like, I got to draw the line there. That is not correct. You know, just because they're not treating the stuff great doesn't mean someone should go in there and steal it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what
it is a shame the way they treat stuff, but no, it doesn't mean it belongs to someone else.
Yeah. It's not how that works. You didn't wax your car recently, so it's mine now.
I'm going to do the bad journalism thing and blame somebody else for the question. There are questions in the chat going back to Theme Park Connection about the resin copies that was put out there. Care to elaborate?
Nope.
Okay.
Not my company.
That's kind of what I suspected.
No, I'm not involved. Don't know.
Don't know or biting your lip?
It wasn't my company. I worked there. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions from the chat?
That was a good one, though. That brings back some memory.
Yeah, hypothetical memories, right?
I mentioned that.
It wasn't
brings back memories to something that might not have happened.
We're about 2 hours in here.
With Theme Park Connection and the in total, that whole thing is, if you go on eBay, there's a lot of like nonsense, people saying things are props that aren't. And I think it's your job before you spend a tremendous amount of money on something to find out if you think like that thing. When I shop on eBay, like today, and I buy a lot of Disney stuff on eBay. I always do a fair amount of research before I buy something on the more expensive side. I look at the pictures, I blow up the pictures on my computer, and I really look at them. And then I really just I talk to some people, some other collectors and stuff, and really try to figure out, like, is this legit? Is this a good price? You shouldn't jump into stuff like that just when you see it. I think in any sort of collecting, if you think you're getting into props and stuff, and it goes for movie props too, because it's way worse in the movie prop business, how much either it's fake or it never was even screen used, but people will say it's screen used. You gotta, if you're gonna get into collecting stuff like that, you need to know stuff. You shouldn't just get into it blindly. You shouldn't Robin Lopez it.
I mean, Ben and I look at this for sports memorabilia as well, that like if you want a game used jersey or anything like that, you want to find a photo of a person wearing that jersey, wearing something where there's like an imperfection in it that you can detect in that photo to prove it, unless you get it certified by the league itself. But
there's a stain on this shirt I'm wearing right now. So if you try to buy this on eBay as an official knee worn shirt, and there's not an armpit stain in it, that is not a legit item. PSA.
I debated like having all of us, dress up as Tom Corliss, but I don't own any checkered shirts. So like, I could put a backpack on because that is kind of your parks wardrobe. But
yeah.
You mentioned we were talking merchandise. What's your favorite piece of merchandise
that
you
God.
own? I know it's a loaded question, but
recently,
it's probably something.
It's sitting in a display case. In the office, we have like some big display cases. But when we used to have people used to come in and watch the show, you know, when you were allowed to go places.
Those are the days.
Tower of Terror bank from Tokyo, where you put money in it. The elevator actually drops and makes noise, and Shriki Utundu like lights up and stuff. I really love that. That brings me a lot of joy.
Did you find in Tokyo that the merchandise that was available when you visited was a lot worse than the merchandise available online?
It depends when you go.
Okay, because I was looking for like specific stuff like that, like a Shriki Utundu thing or a Shandu
attraction
thing.
Stuff rotates in. Usually, it's when the attraction opens, but then it like after a certain amount of time goes away. So like they kept like a base amount of Tower of Terror stuff. So there's sometimes it ebbs and flows too. Like I think my first trip, there was the extent of Tower of Terror merchandise was the Shriki Utundu keychain and like the Tomika trolley that said Tower of Terror on it, or the electric railway car. And then more recently now they have the plush badge, and there's also like a paper model, and there's a replica of the garbage can and stuff. So it ebbs and flows. Some stuff always has a merchandise line, but then like Country Bears, my first trip is when they had the full Country Bear plush line, and they even had the big ones. But now, as of my last trip, those were rotating out, so they're about to get rid of all their Country Bear stuff. So it just depends when you go, but they don't keep stuff for as long as the U.S. parks do. It just doesn't. They rotate through stuff. Those people buy way more merchandise than we do. They love stuff.
It just seemed it was, I mean, obviously different culture, but it was very much in the cutesy vibe that is very popular there. And if you wanted a Disney product, it was going to be emblazoned with Disney and not the type of stuff that I gravitate towards, which, I mean, I'd gravitate towards something that, like, if you know what it is, you know, it'll be like an Epcot logo on a shirt.
Yeah.
You know what it is, and you can have a conversation with me, but
That's
I don't
not
want,
what they
you know,
do with
Mickey Mouse
clothing.
bedazzled.
Yeah, that's
no,
not their
definitely
clothing
not.
thing. That's just not the style in Japan for the clothes. But like for the other stuff, like their seasonal events, obviously it gets cutesy and character driven. But then you just gotta go during the right stuff. So like if you go, I went for the opening of Soarin'. There was a line of Soarin' merchandise, which is specific to the ride, and there was even like a little model of the Dream Flyer vehicle and stuff. So you gotta time it. Like you gotta go when there's something meaningful to you. Like the Tokyo Disney Sea 18th anniversary stuff was all themed to sea and the Magellan's restaurant and like the Fortress Exploration. So during that time, you could get a full setting for your kitchen of Magellan's like sea emblem plates and knives and forks and all of that stuff. But then, like, if you went a couple weeks later, you couldn't find anything specific to an attraction or a land or any of those things.
I think Ben and Josh just started watching movies as we started talking merchandise. So we've definitely lost Josh into the attention span here. Last merchandise question from me. And again, I'm guessing you probably won't answer this. What's the most expensive or most you spent on a merchandise item? Seeing as you said you're getting into some of the higher end stuff.
I would probably answer that. I bought some stuff in the last Van Eaton auction.
Okay.
I bought the Alien Encounter maquettes. They're sitting here in the office too. I bought the Alien Encounter maquettes. They're of some facade work for what was supposed to be the Disneyland Alien Encounter. And so it came with I have the big board, which is the concept art for the Disneyland building. And then there's maquettes of this eagle thing that would have been on the outside of the building. I think I paid, God, I don't remember what it was. It was a couple grand.
Okay.
But I thought it was a cool thing to have on display. We're trying something weird here so when people come, there's like a little museum, and I kind of want to see what the response is to that, because I have a lot of stuff, and I don't know if some point in time, if we move to a bigger space or the opportunity presents itself, that I wouldn't want to do some sort of museum thing.
So people called me out as being boring as an accountant. So like boring for an accountant is just super boring. So with that in mind, did you write that off as a business expense? Are you depreciating those as
That's a business
as assets?
expense, yeah. I mean, it's on display in the office. People come and see it. It's eventually gonna be content. Like so the idea is to rotate the displays in the office. So whenever like the day comes when it's been like a year or so that it's been here, and we're gonna rotate it out, I'll do like an article about it. I'll do video about it. It's content.
Are there any accounting questions from the chat room? Lawyer questions?
Really
Anybody in legal trouble right now? Anybody need a sports meme created for them from Ben?
I actually have to call it. I've been holding a restroom break for about the last 25 minutes, so.
If we want to end, we can end. I'm good with ending if you guys are.
I've ignored my 3-month-old daughter for 2.5 hours, so I should probably leave.
Well, this was fun. I'm glad we did it. I think this was really nice.
I think it was productive.
Far more positive than people probably wanted it to be.
I got some comments to that effect. The last comment I read, I can't swear, but it was on board. Why are you kissing his? And then it was a part of your body that was not your mouth. So, you've been a class act.
We all like the same thing, right? I mean, we're all in this together. We all don't like Bob Chapek. He's an idiot, right? We all liked Horizons and Journey into Imagination. We all don't like that they got rid of the Great Movie Ride, right? I mean,
common ground. Yeah. There's plenty of it.
We can disagree about stuff. We don't have to all hate each other, right?
Nope.
My third bullet point was finding some common ground. Tim. It was actually after How Is Your War with Disney going, and who was actually on the show? You-Ticket Report or Marty called. Other than that, I mean, I think we.
Well, I can't. I don't know how many podcasts you're on. I don't know which ones are still in production. I don't.
Just one now.
Just one now. Okay.
We have Tim all to ourselves.
There you go. Well, guys, thank you so much. Tell everybody where they can find. Tell everybody where they can find the podcast.
You can find us martycalled.com. We put them out maybe once a month or so. We do a Imagineering focused show. So if there's news, we kind of take the operations and Imagineering angle of that news to see, all right, why were these decisions made? Do we agree with these decisions? Could we make better decisions? Sometimes we do armchair Imagineering type episodes, but that's the gist of it. It's not a news show. We like to have things that are more evergreen. So,
and I have a line of merchandise you can get at coronafreedisney.com. That's not a joke. So please hit that. That's good. Absolutely. I'll sell that to you for the right amount, by the way. Have your people call my people.
Wow.
The thing is, I had another domain name, but it turns out I spelled utilidors wrong, so everyone was making fun of me. So now I'm back on the right side.
Oh, man. Yeah, there it is. Okay. I respect that. Oh, boy. All right, well, thank you guys.
Where can we find you online?
Where can you find me online? I think, unfortunately, everyone has. Some people.
Very good talk. I'll see you out there.
You can find me at Twitter at RealSkipperBoone.
bensvan.org.
I think my connection, my connection developed coronavirus over the 2 hours of this show. So I'm sorry, I'm lagging behind a little bit here. But Twitter at RealSkipperBen.
There you go. Thanks, guys, so much. Nick, real quick, can we update everybody on what we got coming up the next couple days before we get on out of here? I don't know if he's drunk yet. No, he's there.
I hope it's e-ticket.
Well, maybe at some point.
Thanks,
my
guys.
goal is to have every podcast Tim has ever been on appear. So tomorrow at 11 a.m. is Locked In with Eric Morton. They're going to be doing some fun stuff, I'm sure. Ride Rehab Watches is tomorrow night at 9. I think they're watching the Walt Disney World 25th anniversary special and some other things. On Sunday, we're going to do a watch along of Onward, which is now on Disney Plus. If you want to wait to watch with us, you can. I don't know if that makes sense, but you may want to watch it before you join us to watch it because we're just going to talk all over it. At 8 p.m., we have a new show, Pressing Issues, which is kind of a throwback to the old podcast where we pick a couple of big topics, and they're going to discuss them at length with no time limits. That debuts. It's going to be every Sunday, but it starts this Sunday at 8 p.m. If you don't want to watch WrestleMania with an empty arena, you can tune in for that. On Monday at 11 a.m., I'm doing an animation countdown. I'm going to rank all of the Disney animated films. It's going to take a while. 9 p.m. Monday night, Cosmic Read Live. He's taking your Disney Parks musical requests. And as well, he'll be doing much more than that. And on Tuesday, it's the debut of, it just says AM. I don't know if we missed the time, if he doesn't know a time yet. Who knows? But at some point in the morning on April 7th, there's going to be the Wolf Den with Eric Wolf. So you're going to be talking about movies, and they're going to be drawing and all sorts of fun stuff. And then Tuesday night at 9 p.m., it's Back to the Future Live. The Carousel of Progress, we're going to take you from the 1964 World's Fair all the way to today, all the way up to laser discs and car phones. Get ready for a complete historical retrospective, a multimedia presentation on the history of...
One of our early shows has a 1980s scene of Carousel of Progress.
What was that?
One of our early shows has a 1980s scene of Carousel of Progress that we recorded with various members of the fan community playing the different roles.
Oh, God. Did you mimic that? Because there is an 80s version, right? There was an
this is something that we wrote. And no, this isn't the 80s scene. It was like we wrote a scene for today that would have been like inserted as a 1980s scene, basically. Yeah.
So anyway, Tuesday 9, we're going to be here for several hours talking about Carousel of Progress. Again, guys, from Marty Call, thank you so much, Tim, Ben, and Josh. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, everybody. We'll see you. Don't miss Locked In with Eric Morton tomorrow at 11. We'll see you then.